Here. Again.
Testing.
Okay, perfect. Working now. So we're going to start with opening remarks from our Chief of Staff. Yes, Jennifer Smith. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Carolina. Welcome to the Resiliency Coordination Forum. I appreciate y'all being here. I just like to appreciate being able to provide opening remarks. I'll be very brief, but just want to stress the importance of this forum and how critically important the efforts here are to our leadership team and our governing board. And so I just want everyone to know what full support you have in these efforts. I appreciate everyone's partnership here, and especially the state and our Chief Resiliency Officer, Wes Brooks, as well. So I think it's great that we're here today. I understand we're going to be focusing on getting local support on our flood response and adaptation planning. And so I understand there's some really good conversations that'll be had. Those things include defining critical high watermark surveys, flood observation surveys, and just some other really, really good training opportunities that I think there are for the local governments. And so we really appreciate your engagement on these things and working with us on these efforts. With that, I just hope you all have a great conversations today and look forward to the outcome myself. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm doing a little bit of the housekeeping items here, and this meeting is being live streamed today. There will be an opportunity for questions after each presentation. If you have a technical question, please complete section 5 of the comment card and hand it to the meeting attendant. Public comment will be taken during agenda item number 11 from those present in the room. For general comment, please complete section 6 of the public comment card. Representatives from local, tribal, and state organizations will have an opportunity to provide agency updates during agenda item number 10. Now to you, Dr. Moran.
Thank you, Yvette. Good morning again, everyone. And now I'm going to invite Dr. Wes Brooks. He's on the line to also provide us some updates from the state. Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you, Carolina. And I also just want to thank Jennifer Smith and the entire leadership team there at South Florida Water Management District for their strong support of these really important initiatives and the collaboration with local governments. It's great to be joining you all once again. And the last time we came together at the end of November, I teased the release of DEP's fiscal year 24-25 statewide resilience plan. For those of you who haven't been tracking, the plan was released on December 1st and ranks projects with a total construction cost of nearly $1.8 billion. By requirement of statute, the plan also breaks out 3 years of funding at $100 million for years 1 and 2, and another $105 million recommended for year 3 of the plan. It's all very relevant given the current and ongoing budget conference happening in Tallahassee this week and potentially next. I hope I'm not stepping on Phil's toes too much here, but the statewide resilience plan is currently funded at $120 million in the Senate bill and $220 million in the House bill. There's also a separate bill that sponsors have indicated would supplement the plan annually with an additional $100 million in state revenues from the Seminole Gaming Compact. So right now, it appears we're on track for between $220 to $320 million for adaptation projects on the statewide resilience plan. If it's that $320 million number, it will cover all years 1, 2, and 3 of DEP's recommended plan and a little bit more. Although I must note, these numbers are subject to change pending negotiations. Projects within the South Florida Water Management District territory are poised to do extremely well yet again, regardless of the final funding outcome. If we are going to take that maximum $320 million number, we're looking at about 21 of the top 42 new projects in line for funding based in South Florida, including 11 in Miami-Dade County, 7 of which are sponsored by the county, 2 by the Water Management District, and 2 by municipalities. 4 in Palm Beach County, 3 by municipalities and 1 by the county, 3 in Lee County, 2 for the town of Fort Myers Beach, and 1 by Lee County Utilities, and then 1 each in Hendry, Monroe, and St. Lucie counties. Stay tuned over the next week and a half, but that's tremendous for the resilience of the region, and I'm sure the enhanced coordination taking place as a result of this forum has contributed to the strong showing yet again in the statewide resilience plan. I'll also be listening today to a couple of key presentations that I think will certainly influence our efforts to continue to prepare the region for future impacts of flooding and sea level rise. Number 1, the Corps is going to be providing a very important update on the Central and Southern Florida flood resiliency study. My colleague, Dr. Tom Frazier, will be sharing some of the latest information being generated out of the Florida Flood Hub. And Dr. Ken Kunkel, who I'll add has been a valued contributor to the Flood Hub's precipitation work group, will also brief us up on NOAA's Atlas 15 data set. So a lot to pack in, including what Jennifer mentioned earlier about coordination between local governments and the Water Management District in being able to analyze and monitor flooding. So look forward to another set of great presentations and dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Moran.
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Thank you very much for being here. We are looking forward to have you here one time. I know we have been trying to have you in person here too, but we'll make it. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to provide some updates here on our resilience, and I'm going to move up there. So. Okay, excellent. So as we do have every quarter, I do have some exciting updates to share with you all today. Beginning with our last meeting, we had a request to the local governments to start looking at what we are calling critical elevations. So it's a data request. We had significant discussions that happened in the last meeting about this rainfall event. There was the November rainfall event that was coincident with the king tide, and a lot of hard time from all of us to operate the system, primary and secondary system, given those elevated water levels upstream and downstream. So we had excellent presentations from 3 municipalities that struggled during the storm to make sure that they ensure flood protection to their citizens, Fort Lauderdale, Dania Beach, and Auckland Park. And based on those discussions, our action, call to action on that meeting was for us to be able to identify those points, similar to what was presented during the meeting, and those are 2 maps that were provided by those municipalities, just really finding points in their system that can help us read elevations during a storm. And again, it's just one more point, one more information that is shared with water managers in general, local and regionally, so we can understand better how the system is behaving during those storms, and again, inform in terms of how we can operate the system. So we went around and we sent some coordinated emails to key points of contacts. We have not heard yet from a lot of the municipalities, but we are in contact with a significant number of counties and municipalities already. So this is just the definition that we put together just for all us to have a common understanding on what we are calling critical elevations. So those elevations in primary and secondary canals that can exacerbate flood risks within the drainage basins. So these risks need to be extended beyond just street flooding. So we are talking about like levels that will be impacting finished floor elevations and causing limited road access, particularly for emergency vehicles. So again, just helping us to understand exactly the thresholds that we want to be monitoring and what is the information that the water managers want to be looking at. So we are asking, we put a table together to be able to facilitate the input data. I know it's hard to read on this slide, but basically what we are requesting is the location of this critical elevation, what is the water level, the associated duration. This is something that also the water managers are very specific. We want to know the duration of the event and the limitations. So we want this elevation along the primary canal and secondary, so both upstream and downstream, helping us to see. We do have a better understanding upstream, but still we need to be able to read this. And also we want to find exactly a description of those vulnerable locations within the drainage basin. And not only that, but what is the operational limitation? So when I see this water level, I cannot discharge this canal, or I need to have a pump, associated temporary pump or something like that. So let us know what's happening with your system so we can coordinate better during those events. So this is the table that we sent out, and this is the list of initial responses that we received so far. We're going to be making one-on-one follow-ups within the next month. I know we have been asking, we extended the deadline one time already, and we're going to extend a little bit more. We understand there are a lot of questions, so some cities are reaching out and asking us for more information, some coordinated calls. This is all great, so we're going to be following up with everybody that asks us for some additional details. And also, again, just get in contact with those that we haven't heard yet. But yeah, we are beginning to get some momentum. Really, we're going to be focusing on really getting this information compiled. The other update is our water and resilience climate metrics. This is a 3-year effort. So we have been working on those metrics with a series of technical leads from the agency, and also coordination and some agreements with key collaborators, including USGS, Florida International University, and University of Miami right now. So updates for the metrics work we have published, to be published. I know our team is very busy on the site here, finalizing the South Florida Environmental Report. We have 2 chapters there, 2A and 2B, that we summarize findings from the metrics every year. So the chapters are ready, and they should be published on Friday. So stay tuned there, and we are also going to have an open house that we're going to have posters from all those major inputs from the South Florida Environmental Report that will happen here in our lobby, April 10 and 11. So all the chapters, not only chapter 2 and 2B, so the entire, this is one of the most exciting events that we have here in the house. For the science lovers, you can spend a whole day being impressed by so many of the work that is being done in this agency. So with regards to our partnership with the USGS and FIU, we are moving forward with the sub-daily rainfall trend and drought projections. So this is really going to inform our water supply vulnerability assessment that we are kicking off with this. We are calibrating the model now. We're going to start running the future scenarios in the summer. And of course, continuing the flood vulnerability assessments that we have been doing. So really making sure that we inform mainly the level of service and our coordination with other agencies as well. We are kicking off the year 2 on the enhanced NOAA tide predictions. Last year was our year 1. We were using data mostly from the American model to do those predictions. We are going to also include the European model as well. And we are potentially finding 1 or 2 more sites on the West Coast. Right now we have Naples. This station was decommissioned after Ian. They are going through some repairs. So we are looking at 2 additional stations and, of course, bringing Naples back when it's fully operational. But we are working with the UM team to make sure we can complete that too on the West Coast. And of course, we have ongoing collaboration with the Florida Flood Hub and on the statewide rainfall projections mostly. We're going to hear from Dr. Fraser in a little bit, so I don't need to spend time on this today. But yeah, significant progress being done also in collaboration with the state at the statewide level. Our plan, we are beginning the 2024 update already. We have already new projects that is going to come. This is one of the major update that we have this year. So we were able to identify 40+ projects that were being initially recommended on FPLOS Phase 1 studies completed in Broward and Miami. So we're going to bring those project descriptions and high-level cost estimates to the plan. And we do have some additional chapters that we're also going to be updating here. So we're going to have a draft version of the 2024 plan available for public comments, and will be released on this meeting next time on May 29th. Grant proposals, we are really further exploring partnership opportunities in 2024. So we are beginning right now. We have a list of some initial project ideas. So we had yesterday actually our kickoff meeting with our executive team just to share some of those project ideas that we heard from the counties. And we are going to continue to, of course, to be able to really look at those partnership opportunities in 2024. What we are looking for this year so far is Resilient Florida. Of course, our main coordination effort there. We are looking at FEMA BRIC and other HGMP. Right now, we don't have any disaster declaration that is active here. We do have Idalia, but there is not a lot of significant funds for the counties within South Florida. There is Florida Commerce also coming, NOAA, and some others, but that's what we are mapping right now for this year. On the implementation side, we are really excited to share that we do have 2 executed contracts with FDEP for our 2 initial Resilient Florida implementation grants. We are finalizing a 3rd one, the Corbett Levy. We are still waiting for some final adjustments there from the FDP, but I mean, it took us a little bit of time to be up and running and really execute those contracts, but we are excited to be where we are here now, working very closely with FDP and the PMs that are helping us in this process. We continue to work very closely with FDM to advance our FEMA BRIC. We have no agreements yet received from either the 2021 or 2022 recommended grants, but we are working. We have also formulated a letter that we sent to the FEMA officials as well to see if we can get some feedback on that. We are working to complete the work plan for the FDP Innovative Tech Grant that we got in Miami-Dade. That's an exciting one. We're going to be testing 2 technologies in the canal bank. We selected the C9 basing. So along the canal bank, testing some nature-based like additional water quality that we can get as we are really collecting this storm water in those basins. So exciting project. We're really, really close to close the work plan, to finalize the work plan, and then, of course, work on the final arrangements there with FDP. We are just working very closely with the 3 vendors in Miami-Dade County here. The team is doing an incredible job. And then excited too, we got this, our first Resilient Florida planning grant in St. Lucie and Martin County. We had our kickoff meeting about 3 weeks ago. So we had already initiated the FPLOS phase 1 study for this basin. Right now we are going to really make this project one project, a joint phase 1, phase 2, going all the way to the adaptation planning phases, working with those 2 counties. So really excited to be kicking off this effort too. I know we have been waiting for that for quite some time. Coordination efforts with the Corps. We have Tim Geisen, and I see Eva Velez just joining us. And so we are going to be providing updates. They will probably provide more details than what I have here. But we are really working on the future without runs. The modeling team has never stopped. They are at full speed. We have a performance metrics workshop, basically how we're going to be reading those outputs from the model and how we're going to use that to select project alternatives. So the workshop is March 6 and 7. We also want to recognize here a support, and I do have one more slide. I'll jump to that. So we got the Planning Council to coordinate with the counties on a support for the study here. This is mainly a response to new design requirements that are being now required by the Army Corps for us to have projects authorized. This is a significant amount of money that is going to have to be brought to this, to this study. And the counties jump in here and are willing to collaborate to help us to advance more design so we can get more projects authorized as part of this study. So we are working very closely with the Army Corps to see how we can make this work. But again, really recognizing the support from the Broward and Miami-Dade County that quickly jump and are really offering resources here for us to be able to complete this study, again, with a larger number of recommended projects. So thanks for the Planning Council too, South Florida Planning Council that facilitated the discussion and really put the 2 counties there together to talk about that and recognize the urgency of this study. Going back to the comprehensive study here, we are waiting on the implementation guidance, but we did hear from the Corps that we do have a person assigned now to be working with them on this implementation guidance. This is exciting. So again, let's wait to hear from them. We are reviewing the cost share agreement already with them, making sure that we can have the template there, what we need to be done before we execute that agreement. We are not yet with funding for this project, but we are working very early on this agreement between the 2 agencies so we can start this project up and running. And then we are also looking at a compound flooding proposal. We are working with ERDEC on that. This is needed, so we do not have yet a selected tool to be able to look at this entire CNSF comprehensive area and be able to fully assess those compound flooding risks. So fingers crossed for this proposal to be moving forward. I don't know if I touch all the important updates, but I'm sure Tim and Eva will cover next, and I'm happy to go along with them when we are there. So just final other relevant updates here. Dr. West and Dr. Fraser mentioned about the statewide efforts. We do have a very important one going on right now. It's the flood risk modeling effort, so it's funded through the Silver Jackets effort. All the water management districts, FDM, other agencies, the Florida Flood Hub, we are all sitting on those calls. And the very important discussion that we are having on those calls is really on tools like that we already have in the state. So mostly like a gap analysis that we're going to be doing to understand where we have those flood vulnerability tools, what kind of tools we have, some of the requirements that we have there. And we in South Florida are very particularly interested in this discussion because we know we have very specific limitations in South Florida that will be required for us to be able to really model flood vulnerability here. Those minimum requirements, I think everybody who is a modeler in this room will understand that we need to be able to represent subsurface, surface interactions. This is key in any part here in South Florida. We have a very shallow groundwater level, and we are not talking just about infiltration into the soil. We are really talking about exchange throughout the flooding event. That's what happens, and we have been seeing that in many of the simulations. So that needs to be included. We also have a very complex water management system there that we set operational rules. We have predetermined operational rules, so it's not a physical, geographic-based model. There is no way we can derive any flood elevation based on a simplified tool. We need to be able to represent those structures, the operation that we have there. That's the only way to read water levels right here in South Florida. And again, we all know, very low lying flat areas. So there is a lot of significant tools already done in the state. Counties, municipalities, and the water management district invested significant amount of money, time, experience, and resources to be able to advance those tools. And I think we have a big challenge here to be able to walk with the state in parallel with that. We know that we also need some statewide tool, and there is a lot of limitations as well there, like how can we get a statewide assessment knowing that we need to understand what's the level, what's the resolution, what can we do on our state level, but at the same time, we need to be recognizing those minimum processes that need to be represented here. So we are working on a one-pager just to talk about this a little bit and really describe exactly what are the limitations that we have in South Florida. And again, we welcome your input. I know you're all kind of dealing with those things here. And to close the slides here, I just want to go on a more celebratory mode here. We celebrated 4 years of the program about 2 weeks ago. We had an internal event, mostly because we have a small team in the Resiliency team, but there is significant amount of people in the agency working for the Resiliency program. So we really do that every year internally with all the teams that work here, recognizing all the efforts, the work that they have been doing. Even before we were officially calling Resiliency, I think the concept of resiliency was always embedded here in this agency. So it's important that we recognize there, and we were able to kind of compile a little bit of what we have right now, achieve through this more kind of concentrated focus effort in these last 4 years. So we do have 4 million people that we were able to map through the projects that we have funding right now, and we are getting to 340 million in grant award fundings, that including the match requirements. So again, reaching a significant number here in terms of projects that we are moving towards implementation, so 14 grants. We are working very closely with 25 agencies at the state, federal, local level too. We are mapping those. A lot of those grants are in partnership, and not only that, but we have partnerships like we are seeing here today. And we are working very closely with several number of stakeholders. So we do also have recurrent stakeholders on our distribution list and our communications. So we reached 2,407 numbers there. As I said, the plan, we have already 38 priority projects identified, and we are bringing 40-plus components. They are not new projects in all the cases, but they are components to some of those existing projects. So we're going to see an increase in the number here in 2024. We do have 9 Age model reviews that we have been doing, so we work very closely, as you know, with the Flood Protection Level of Service program here and the CNSF Flood Resiliency Study. This is really the approach that we have to bring projects to the plan. So anyway, just recognizing the efforts to go through those model reviews that we do very closely with the Age team. And the famous metrics, we have 15 documented water and climate metrics there, 8 metrics with real-time data access. This is the metrics that we do have data in DB Hydro Insights. So we have linked them all, and we are really seeing those trends being plotted on a daily basis as real-time access there. And we have also reached the 14, we are missing just one, that are when the SPR is published this year. We really have all of those 14 out of 15 documented in the South Florida Environmental Report. We are talking a lot about that today. We have the South Florida Flood Information Resource there too. It was launched. You all saw it on the last, I believe we had an introduction 2 meetings before and then the launch on the last meeting. We're going to talk a little bit about that today too, but we do have a very extensive database on past flood events that we were able to compile. We are continuing to refine it. If you let Chris work on that, I know she's going to be refining incredibly for the next 2-3 years, but we do have already a very significant number of past events that are compiled in this database. And we also were able to advance 2 future projections metrics. So that was actually part of a phase 2 for the metrics work, but we are already advancing. So from the rainfall side and then the king tide season, we are really advancing some of those projections. And good news of the day today, I'm beating the core, and I don't know if I'm going to let them show their slide, but we are hiring. We have 2 new positions within the Office of District Resiliency that are going to be posted soon. I was hoping they would be posted this morning. They're not there yet, but be tuned. So stay in touch there on the South Florida Gulf Careers, and please help me distribute this message to your contacts. We really want to be able to get good people here working with us because we do have a lot of work. So with that, thank you. Here, I just added a slide from some of the upcoming events. We do have an event that was kicking off right now, Southwest Florida Climate Summit. We're going to be joining them tomorrow. But if you want to take a look on what's happening there, just go ahead and go and check the website there. And there is still time if you want to head to Punta Gorda. March 5th, we're going to have the South Florida Hydrologic Society. I have a poster here on the side. It's at the end of the day, it's a happy hour informal event, but we're going to have a presentation from Dr. Sukop there on the coastal subsurface monitoring project. That's a $10 million project that they are involved now through legislative appropriation at the state. March 7 and 8, we have, as I said, the CNSF Flood Resiliency Virtual Workshops. March 26 to 29, NOAA will be hosting the Climate Diagnostics and Prediction Workshop. It's the 48th year, I believe. It's going to be here in Florida this time, so in Tallahassee. And April 10 and 11, we have the open house for the SVER, the South Florida Environmental Report, here in the headquarters in the lobby. And our next meeting is on May 29. So thank you. With that, we're going to be moving the agenda. Let me get my script here. We have, coming up now, we have Phil Flood. He's in Tallahassee. Again, we're waiting to have you here one day, Phil, but I don't think it's going to be possible because we are always going to have those legislative updates during the session. His agenda very full there in Tallahassee now, but thank you very much, Phil, for joining us and providing us an update on this year session.
Well, thank you, Carolina, and good morning. And today I wanted to give a brief overview of the ongoing legislative session, touch on some of the relevant resiliency bills, and then run through some of the funding that we're likely to see for next year. Next slide, please. So the Florida legislature is currently in week 8 of their scheduled 9-week session. It's scheduled to end a week from this Friday on March 8th. There's been over 1,950 legislative bills filed this session. And kind of as expected, about 35% of those bills were never presented or heard in a committee. And so far, 32 bills have already passed the Senate and the House and have been sent to the governor for his consideration. He's signed 2 of those bills into law already. And as of today, there's about 650 bills that could possibly pass and become law. But keep in mind that there's typically only about 300 or less bills that pass every year, so less than half of those 650 are likely going to move forward. So as of all the bills that were filed this session, I found a reference to about 60 of them that are related to resiliency, flooding, or sea level rise. Of those bills, I'm going to go ahead and highlight those that are relevant to the environment or the coast, and specifically those that have a chance of becoming law. Next slide, please. So we'll start with Senate Bill 298, Local Government Coastal Protections by Senator Polsky. So this bill restricts new coastal construction control measures and amends funding provisions for saltwater intrusion vulnerability assessments. Specifically, it would allow DEP to provide grants of up to $250,000 to coastal counties for saltwater intrusion vulnerability assessments. It would require the vulnerability assessments to include an analysis of the county's primary water utilities, including cost to relocate impacted freshwater well fields. In addition, it would obligate DEP to use the vulnerability assessment information to update the statewide flood vulnerability and sea level rise data set. So this bill has passed all of its committees and it's awaiting a full vote by the Senate. Its companion House bill, however, died in committee. So we'll have to wait and see how this one moves. Next slide, please. So Senate Bill 1526 and House Bill 1647 are identical bills. They're known as the Local Regulation of Nonconforming and Unsafe Structures. This bill creates the Resiliency and Safe Structures Act, and it's aimed at regulating the demolition and redevelopment of certain nonconforming or unsafe structures. It's a local preemption bill, providing that a local government may not prohibit the demolition of certain structures except for public safety reasons. So the two bills have both passed all their committee hearings, and they're waiting a vote in their respective chambers. Next slide. House Bill 1581, Mangrove Replanting and Restoration by Representative Mooney. This bill requires DEP to adopt new rules for mangrove replanting and restoration, as well as conducting a statewide feasibility study on utilizing mangroves for flood insurance benefits. The rules must support Everglades restoration and Biscayne Bay revitalization, and it must include living shoreline designs. The bill also encourages local projects for coastal protection through the Resilient Florida Grant Program, and requires DEP to conduct a feasibility study on using mangroves for coastal flood risk reduction. This bill is actually up for a vote on the House floor today, and once it passes, it'll be sent over to the Senate for their consideration. It has a companion bill over in the Senate. However, that bill failed to make it out of the committee meetings. Next slide, please. House Bill 1557 and Senate Bill 1368 is a bill put forth by the Department of Environmental Protection. The bill amends several DEP program areas to enhance environmental protection and management. It particularly focuses on aquatic conservation, water management, and wastewater treatment. It's a very lengthy bill. However, among its provisions, it requires that water management districts develop rules promoting reclaimed water use and encouraging quantifiable potable water offsets. And it also defines Florida Flood Hub and revises terms and requirements concerning the Resilient Florida Grant Program and the statewide flood vulnerability and sea level rise assessments. House Bill 1557 was passed by the House and has been sent over to the Senate, where it is awaiting a vote. Next slide, please. House Bill 1417 and Senate Bill 1638 involves funding for environmental resource management. This landmark bill allocates revenue from the Seminole Tribe Gaming Compact to environmental and water quality initiatives. The bill mandates that a specific percentage of revenue annually goes to the Florida Wildlife Corridor acquisition, to land management and invasive species removal, to the statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan, and to water quality improvements. Specifically, $100 million each year will go to the Resilient Florida Trust Fund. Next slide. And in addition, as Dr. Brooks mentioned, for the fiscal year 24-25, it includes $100 million allocated to the statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan. And also, I'm happy to announce that for fiscal year 24-25, it also includes $150 million allocated to the South Florida Water Management Districts for operation and maintenance activities. So this bill was passed by the House and is awaiting a Senate vote. Next slide. Of course, one of the most important bills is the General Appropriations Act that the legislature must pass. The bill contains all the state agency program funds as well as numerous specific project funds. This year, the House spending bill has a total of $115.5 billion, while the Senate is slightly larger at $115.9 billion. This week, the Senate and House began the budget conference process to resolve the differences between the two budgets. The budget conference must be completed and the budgets approved by the Senate and House by next Tuesday in order for the legislature to end on time, which is Friday, March 9th. So let's take a look at what's in the budget for next year as of today. Next slide, please. So Governor DeSantis released his budget for the upcoming year and is known as Focus on Florida's Future. It includes $875 million for the protection of water resources. Included in that is $745 million for Florida's Everglades. I'm happy to report that that funding has been agreed to by the House and the Senate and will be included in the budget that's passed. The recommended budget also includes $150 million for improvements to the Central and South Florida system infrastructure. I'm extremely happy to report that this funding has also been included in the budget of both chambers. The governor also recommended $157 million for the Resilient Florida program, and it includes $100 million for statewide resiliency projects and $57 million for planning and coral reef protection. As Dr. Brooks mentioned, at this point, the Senate has $200 million for resiliency projects and the House has $325 million. The final agreed to amount will come out of the budget conference this weekend. And both chambers have also agreed to the $20 million for planning. Also, the governor's recommendation of $50 million for the beach management program has been included in both of the budgets. And also the House and Senate budgets will contain a number of local resiliency and water related projects, many of which are still being negotiated. So keep in mind that the budget negotiations are likely to continue through the end of this weekend. And so you'll see some final changes and tweaks to the budget that the legislature will adopt next week. And next slide, and I am done. And with that, I'll take any questions that anybody might have.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Phil. Good luck in the last week there. And opening up for any questions quickly that we might have. Nobody online either. Yeah, let's go. So, thank you, Phil. We're going to move to the agenda item number 5. I just want to make sure that we have Dr. Kunkel in line. I know he had a commitment, and he was going to join us at 9:30. So I think you should be there, but just confirming if that is Dr. Kunkel there.
Yes, it is.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Dr. Kunkel, for joining us. Again, as Wes introduced, he is also part of the rainfall projections work group that is led by the Florida Flood Hub. So we are really excited to have him joining us today and giving us an update on the NOAA Atlas 14. Thank you, Dr. Kunkel, very much for joining us here.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, what I'm going to be talking about today is NOAA Atlas 15 projections. So the NOAA Atlas 15, which is an update to NOAA Atlas 14, will come out in 2 volumes. Volume 1 will be, I would say, essentially an update of what NOAA Atlas 14 currently includes, and that is it's based on historical data. Volume 2 will look ahead into the future and develop projections under various scenarios for future warming. So I'm responsible for developing those Volume 2 projections. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. This talk was given at the annual meeting of the American Meteorological Society about a month ago. Next slide. So why are we doing projections? Well, all 6 assessment reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and all 5 U.S. national climate assessment reports have been uniform in projecting increases in extreme precipitation if the globe continues to warm. Next slide. So the question is, why? Well, the reason is that the potential of the atmosphere to hold atmospheric moisture increases with temperature following the Clausius-Clapeyron relationship. Next slide. And what's notable about that is that this is an exponential relationship. So it increases very rapidly. And if we talk about increases by 7% per degree Celsius, if we talk about, let's say, warming of 2 or 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, we're talking about increases in atmospheric moisture of 10, 15, 20, or even more percent. So we're talking about really big numbers. Next slide. And if we look at climate models, they actually reflect this very powerfully. This is an analysis that I did of CMIP6 projections, and it shows near annual maximum near surface atmospheric moisture. And I'm looking at the difference between the late 21st century and around the beginning of the 21st century under a particular scenario, SSP 3-7.0. And what in this graph, it shows a global picture of the changes in the future. Brown colors indicate decreases, teal colors indicate increases. Well, where's the brown? Well, there is no brown. All the models are uniform in projecting increases in atmospheric moisture under warming. So following this Clausius-Clapeyron relationship. And this has been true for all of the CMIP6 phases of climate model projections. Next slide. Does that have any effect on precipitation? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. This is an analysis that I did, and there are many other researchers who've done parallel types of analyses. What this shows is the relationship between extreme precipitation amounts and atmospheric water vapor content. And so this is over the coterminous US, so it's really a statistical summary. But if we look at rainfall amounts, and these are only extreme rainfall amounts, and look at how much atmospheric water vapor was around at the time, what we find statistically is a monotonic relationship with atmospheric water vapor content. This particular variable, precipitable water, is a measure of that, and commonly used by meteorologists. And so we have this monotonic relationship. So we expect that as atmospheric moisture increases, that on average, extreme precipitation amounts will also increase. Next slide. Do the models do this? We know now that from that previous slide that the models indicate with warming, atmospheric moisture content increases. What do they do with precipitation? Well, this shows a particular metric of extreme precipitation. It's the 30-year extreme daily precipitation. So it's sort of like a 30-year storm, you could look at it. And once again, teal colors indicate that the models are indicating increases, brown decreases. Almost everywhere there are increases. There are a few exceptions here in the oceanic subtropics where there are actually decreases. But other than that, we expect the models are simulating increases almost everywhere else. Next slide. Okay, so in NOAA 15 Volume 2, we want to actually quantify that. What do we expect in the future under various warming scenarios? And while Clausius-Clapeyron is a very powerful constraint on this, we don't necessarily expect an exact scaling of extreme precipitation with Clausius-Clapeyron for at least 2 reasons. One, in convective storms, the vertical uplift in convective storms may be enhanced because in the future there'll be more water vapor within the convective storms. There's an increase in latent heat release. That actually might accelerate the vertical motion upward. Second thing is that there could be, and will be in some areas, changes in the frequency and or the intensity of the weather systems that cause extreme precipitation. And so in those cases, those changes will modify the increases we might expect just solely due to increases in water vapor content. Next slide. So we have a big challenge with NOAA Atlas 15. Next slide. And the challenge is represented here, and this is the same for NOAA Atlas 14. What we're expected to come up with rainfall design values for 19 different durations ranging from 5 minutes out to 60 days. We're also expected to develop these for 10 annual exceedance probabilities from 63%, that's actually a 1-year return interval, down to 0.1%, which is essentially a 1,000-year storm. So we have this wide range of durations and annual exceedance probabilities that we are expected to deliver. Next slide. So where do we turn for answers to this projection, this question? Well, climate model simulations are a prime source, and we would like lengthy, multi-decadal simulations from multiple models for multiple future emissions pathways. And furthermore, we would like high spatial resolution, and we would like the data to be available from these models at sub-hourly time resolution. Well, the reality is we don't have this. Next slide. So what do we have that we can work with? Next slide. Well, one source is downscaled, statistically downscaled climate model data sets. And one of the hats I wear is I'm the lead scientist for NOAA's Technical Support Unit for the National Climate Assessment. And my group is responsible for producing foundational climate science material for the authors of the report. And we used in the 5th National Climate Assessment that just came out 3 months ago, 2 statistically downscaled climate model data sets. LOCA 2 version, a 2nd generation version of the LOCA method, which is at 1/16 degree resolution, and STAR. It's a new climate model algorithm or data set. It's at 1/24 degree resolution. So we have those 2 available. We're also going to have available a 3rd one, which has been developed at the University of Wisconsin. It's called the University of Wisconsin Probabilistic Downscaling Data Set, which is yet a 3rd spatial resolution, 1/10 of a degree. Next slide. All 3 of these data sets provide resolution at the daily time scale. And so we can use it for 24-hour duration and longer durations. And maybe we can use it down to maybe the 1 to 2% or the 50 to 100-year storm annual exceedance probability range. Next slide. In the NOAA Atlas 15 project, we are currently working on a pilot product that will be released to the public for comment and review. It's going to focus on Montana. And here's some analysis from these 3 data sets for Montana. And this happens to be for the 20-year storm or the 5% annual exceedance probability and daily. And it shows the change factor that we would apply to the volume 1 estimates. And if you look at these, all the colors are this teal color, which indicates that all the models are projecting, all these data sets are projecting increases for Montana all throughout the state. And furthermore, they're fairly large in many cases. However, there are differences spatially. We think this is just essentially statistical noise. And so one of our conclusions is that we have to, we're going to be averaging these adjustment factors over relatively large areas in multiple models. Next slide. Excuse me. So it's a great resource, but it's limited. We only have daily resolution. We don't have sub-daily. And there's very limited CMIP6 data availability at sub-daily resolutions. Next slide. So what do we do about sub-daily durations? Next slide. Well, one important point about subdaily resolutions, time resolutions, is that as the duration shortens, localized convection may play a more important role in extreme events. And so what we're looking to is a class of models called convection resolving climate models, or they're also called convection permitting climate models, which they're essentially the same thing. Very high spatial resolution. And the very high spatial resolution means that they can actually simulate individual thunderstorm cells, and they don't have to parameterize that in the models. So they can directly actually simulate these convective towers. Next slide. So we're looking to some sources for these data, and they're quite limited. And the reason they're quite limited is that, you know, there isn't any free lunch. If you go down to very high spatial resolution, the computational demands for running long simulations explodes. And for that reason, there's very few of these available. One is being produced by the National Center for Atmospheric Research. They've completed a historical simulation, which is called CONUS 44. And they're working on a future simulation that we hope is available very shortly. And we hope and plan to use that in our NOAA Atlas 15 work. Next slide. We also have a simulation that has been produced by Northern Illinois University. It's similar resolution, 3.75 spatial resolution, and they have data available at 15-minute time resolution. And they produced an historical and future simulations for a 15-year block of time. So it's not super long, but at least it is at this very high spatial resolution. Next. And another resource we were looking at is something called NA-Cordex. This is a set of dynamically downscaled climate model simulations. This is a coordinated experiment, and this particular NA-Cordex has simulations. Really, they hardly have any simulations based on CMIP6, but they have a set of simulations based on CMIP5. We are analyzing that set. It's not at the convection permitting resolution, but it's pretty high resolution, 25-kilometer spatial resolution. And they have very long simulations going from, depending on the model, either the 1950s or 1970s, continuously out to 2100. Next slide. And other high-resolution simulations may become available during this project. Next slide. So how are we dealing with this? We don't have many simulations at the subdaily resolution. And essentially, we are working from a null hypothesis, is that the relative adjustment, the change factor that we're going to be applying for the future, is the same for durations from 5 minutes out to 24 hours. So we have lots of data for the 24-hour simulation, and our null hypothesis, or maybe our what we'll do if we don't have enough data to disprove this, is just say the relative adjustment is the same. And what we'll be looking at is, do these high-resolution simulations provide robust evidence that this is not the case? Next slide. Well, this is a very early analysis of just a single model from NA-Cordex showing the relative change. So what we did is we computed the adjustment factor for 24-hour. We also computed the change for hourly, and we looked at how are those different. And this is actually the difference of the changes. So it's kind of a little bit complicated here. But once again, the color scale is the same. Increases are teal, brown or decreases are brown. And what you see is that over, say, the Western U.S., it looks like it's sort of, variable around zero, not big changes. But in the Central U.S., this particular model is showing larger changes for the hourly time duration than for the 24-hour duration. So if this is confirmed by our other model data sets that we have, we might be actually making a larger adjustment for the hourly durations than we are for the 24-hour and longer durations. Next slide. So what about small annual exceedance probabilities, particularly going out to 500 and 1,000 years, or 0.2 to 0.1? Next slide. How do we deal with that? Well, it's very hard to reliably estimate a 500 and 1,000 year storm, historically even, with only about 100 years of high quality historical data. And the same thing applies to future projections, where single model simulations extend to 2100, but they don't go beyond that. The approach we're going to use is actually to pool climate model data to essentially get more model years. Next slide. We have a couple resources we're looking at. There's a large ensemble of global climate model simulations from a particular model that NOAA has developed called SPEAR. It's at 50-kilometer resolution, and they've completed 30 members. So if we were to take, say, the last 50 years of the 21st century and compared it to, say, the last 50 years of the 20th century, now from this large ensemble, well, we have about 1,500 future years to look at. So now we're starting to talk about something we might be able to get some results for, say, the 1,000-year return period. There's another, the second one that's listed here is one developed by NCAR. And now this slide, there are also some large ensembles in CMIP 6 that are available, and we'll be looking into those as well. Next slide. So for this, we're kind of formulating the same null hypothesis, is that the relative adjustment will be the same for AEPs down from 2% all the way down to 0.1%. So we're essentially saying that the adjustment for a 50-year storm can be applied all the way out to a 1,000-year storm. And then we'll be looking at these large ensemble simulations to see if there's robust evidence that this is not the case. Next slide. That's the end.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kunkel. This was excellent. We are working very closely with him, and a lot of the points that he made here is some that we have been discussing in the rainfall work group. Just a quick a quick summary, just to reinforce 2 points. In Florida, we are heavily dependent on those convective storms, so that's the big piece that we cannot get resolved right now on the existing downscaling data sets, because they don't have the resolution. I think it was very clear on his presentation here. So that's something we are working on with the Florida Flood Hub. And of course, the other types of storms, mainly tropical storms, extratropical storms that we also have here in Florida. So anyway, excellent presentation. Thank you very much for your update here. I know you have been talking about getting Florida as your next study case, and we're going to have fingers crossed. I know the whole room here would agree with me that it would be great if you could get Florida as your next study case.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for having me.
no, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions? I don't want to hold Dr. Kunkel until the end, so if we have any question here in the audience. Anybody? Okay, we don't have questions here, Dr. Kunkel. Thank you again very much. We're going to be in touch in our next coordination meetings, and if we have any major update, we'll invite you to come back again and tell us. Hopefully, we can get in your busy agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a break time. I know this presentation was very, I would say, dense, so let's take a break, let's talk a little bit, and let's go to the second session that is going to be as dense as the first one, but thank you. So we're going to have about 10 minutes, so let's try to come back. I think it's fine to come back at 10:15. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started.
Okay, I think we're live back. Okay, I'm really excited to introduce you today to Dr. Fraser. We have been working for quite a few years since we started here in my position. I remember our first meetings, but more recently working very closely with the Florida Flood Hub in a lot of our initiatives. And we were finally able to find some time in his agenda to come here in person. So this is an honor to have you here, Dr. Fraser. I'm happy to introduce you here to talk about some of the progress on the work groups. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Carolina, and hopefully it's not the last time I get an opportunity to come and talk to the group. I, again, really appreciate you, Carolina, inviting me to come in and speak with folks today. I also appreciated the comments of our Chief Resiliency Officer, Dr. Wes Brooks, this morning. Ken Kunkel gave a great talk. Phil Flood gave a good talk. So there's clearly a lot of information that's being disseminated in these forums. So again, just a kudos to you, Carolina, and your team for putting this together. So today I want to talk a little bit about the Flood Hub. I'm not sure everybody knows exactly what it is and what its purpose is. Talk a little bit about some of our initial work as it relates to sea level rise specifically, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit about where we're headed with our rainfall working group. But that may have to wait till we come back for another forum. But in any case, so the the Flood Hub, it's short for the Flood Hub, Florida Flood Hub for Applied Research and Innovation, and it's hosted at the University of South Florida and the College of Marine Science, and it was established, obviously, by the state as part of a legislative action, and it was really intended to help us focus and address some of the state's most pressing environmental challenges, specifically as they're relating to flooding. And so what do we want to do? We obviously wanted to improve flood forecasting, and we want to provide science-based information, right, for policymakers, planners, and managers. So I spent a lot of time, obviously, in Tallahassee prior to my position at the University of South Florida, and really have a passion for trying to link science and policy and management. I think we could do a better job at that, and I think the Flood Hub is really positioned to make some strides in that regard. So ultimately, of course, our goal is to help inform resilience, and as everybody in this room is well aware, that's the ability of communities to prepare for, withstand, and rebound from floods and other natural hazards. So, to achieve its various objectives, the Flood Hub relies heavily on its scientific and technical expertise, not only in the state of Florida, right, but nationally and in some cases internationally. And so the working model is this, right? So there are a number of different working groups. So in this particular case, we have on this slide, the first one that we stood up was a sea level rise work group. The second one is the rainfall work group. And then we're in the process now of putting together a more comprehensive modeling work group, but there will be others, right? And each of those work groups has a specific charge. Sometimes they're not just one and done, they're kind of living work groups. And I'll point that out as I talk specifically about the sea level rise work group. But again, the work groups are the heart of the Flood Hub, they really are. They're comprised of subject matter experts, scientists who have a great deal of expertise in this particular space. And I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm getting a little older and I can't even read my own notes anymore. But in this group in particular is going to deal with such issues as sea level rise, high tide flooding events, storm surge, and extreme rainfall events, right? And again, so the work groups actually concentrate expertise, right, to fill gaps in the data. They help evaluate existing models, and sometimes they create new models or advance efforts that are in place right now. And so, again, there's a lot of subject matter expertise, a lot of scientific expertise here, and all of their efforts are intended to provide the best information possible for folks in this room, right? People that are policymakers, planners, and things of that nature. So the group is collaborative by design. And again, I want to point out the Flood Hub is not the only game in town, right? A lot of people work in this space, and we recognize that. What we want to be able to do is to foster partnerships. We rely on the strengths of those partnerships. The working relationship that we have with the district is a good example of that. But we have other partners as well. Those partners are not limited just to scientists in universities or water management districts. There's a whole suite of stakeholders out there, regional planning councils, other resiliency coalitions, for example, and state, local governments. So we, of course, work pretty closely with the Resilient Florida program. Dr. Brooks talked about that early on in his opening remarks, and Phil Flood in his kind of legislative overview showed that the state has a strong interest investing in that program because it's in the best interest of all of our citizens, right, and visitors to the state. So, but with the time that I have today, I wanted to specifically talk about the work that's being carried out by the Sea Level Rise Working Group. And again, that group is charged very specifically with assessing coastal flooding risks that are associated not only with sea level rise, but recurrent high tides, storm surge, and other events that are related to regional changes in ocean and atmospheric dynamics. So I've given this talk, or parts of this talk in different forums. It's been modified just a little bit because after a review of the initial report from the working group, we had a slight modification in the estimates, but they're on the order of like 1 or 2 millimeters, so they're not big, but nevertheless they're important to share with the group and provide these updates as they come along. All right, so let me kind of explain and walk through what the working group did. And so the work group, as I said before, didn't create any new data, all right? They took the information that was available and released as part of the federal task force report in 2022, all right? So the raw data is exactly the same, but what we did do is we focused our efforts on Florida, because in that 2022 federal task force report, essentially the way that they regionalized or aggregated the data, they had a southeast region, right, which kind of in a northeast Gulf region, which essentially split peninsular Florida right down the middle. And there's good reasons for them to do that. We're not arguing that that was inappropriate necessarily. But what we ask, the working group asked, is whether or not that way of aggregating or binning the data was actually appropriate for Florida. And so what the working group did is they looked at the same data, they aggregated it or regionalized it specifically for Florida, so kind of removing that subjective, right, kind of delineation right down the middle of the state, and created a new set of estimates and for the state of Florida, right? So the group also, so they provided those sea level rise estimates for various time horizons, all with a base of 2000, right? And so we have 4 time horizons, 2000 to 2020, 2000 to 2024, 2050, and 2070. And we use the same sea level rise scenarios that were used in the federal task force report. So the terminology is the same, right? So you have 5 typical sea level rise scenarios, everything from low, intermediate, high, and high. And then the way that the data are laid out, and I'll spend most of my time on these tables so people appreciate what that information means. It tells you what's expected with with regard to sea level rise at these various time horizons. That's the magnitude of the risk that we're talking about. And then we also provide a table with the exceedance probabilities, right, specific to each of the sea level rise scenarios and either temperature or emission pathways, right? And so that's the probability, right, of exceeding or realizing that risk. So whenever you're talking about vulnerability or risk assessment, you need to have both of those component parts, right? What's the magnitude of the risk, and what's the likelihood that you're going to realize, you know, a particular event. So with that said, I'll pop on over to the next slide. All right, so these are the initial estimates of sea level rise, again, from the Sea Level Rise Work Group. And I want to just reiterate, these are using the same data that were used in the national assessment, right? And that report was released in 2022. They're similar in general. They are slightly lower, right? But what you could see here is that as you look at this table from the values in the upper left, right, which those are millimeters and inches, and you were to kind of take a diagonal look down to the bottom right of this table, there's a general tendency, as you would expect, for a divergence in those values, right? So the longer the time horizon, or the further out you go, the more sea level rise you can expect, obviously. And depending on the sea level rise scenario, from low to high, obviously, the highest sea level rise scenario is going to give you the greatest magnitude of change. So in this particular case, the lowest values are for the 20 to 2022 time horizon are 3.6 inches, right? That's the amount of sea level rise that we would have expected to observe 2 or 3 years ago, which in fact we did, right? And by 2070, if we were to look at the high sea level rise scenario, we might expect more than 38 inches. Okay. So, as I said before, there are two components that we want to be paying attention to here. One is the magnitude of the risk, and the other one is the likelihood of the risk. And in this particular case, what we said is that if you look at the left side of the screen, those are the various sea level rise scenarios. There are 5 of them. And depending on the amount of warming or temperature increase, we could have expressed this as emission pathways as well. And in fact, we do that for this particular presentation. I just do it as temperature to illustrate the point. But it tells you what the likelihood is of exceeding the estimated values, right, at any one of those temperatures. So I'm going to come back to this table, but I just wanted to show you it initially, all right? So what the work group did is they said, okay, what is the most likely pathway that we're on right now, right? And by all accounts, by 2100, right, we're on a pathway that puts us close to 3 degrees C, all right? And so, again, that's the most likely scenario given the mitigation measures that were in place at 2020, all right? So knowing that, the work group kind of focused their attention on that 3 degree scenario, right? And they also looked at the intermediate low and the intermediate sea level rise scenario, because those are the ones that you might most likely incorporate into a decision, right, that with regard to planning. And so in this particular case, if you look at the intermediate low scenario, for example, at 3 degrees C along that kind of pathway, there's an 82% chance, right, that you're going to exceed the values that I provided or showed you in that first table, all right? So if you're relatively risk tolerant, you might be, you might be willing to accept that level of risk, right? However, if you're more risk averse, then you might look at the intermediate scenario and say, okay, well, there's only about a 5% chance that I'm going to exceed that value. So the Flood Hub is not here to tell people what to do, and that's really, really important, right? What the Flood Hub is trying to do is to provide the best information possible that allows people to make objective decisions, right, based on the data that we provide. So again, you know, we can show you what the magnitude of the risk is. We can provide different insight into emission scenarios or changes in temperature. But if you're a decision maker, ultimately you have to pick one of those, right? Whether it's how much temperature do you expect by 2100 or what the emission pathway is, right? So again, so I started off talking about the magnitude of risk. Then I talked a little bit about the likelihood of that occurrence. So I'm going to bring it back to the magnitude here, and again, focus on the most likely sea level rise scenarios. In this particular case, it's the intermediate low and the intermediate scenarios. And you can see, for example, if we look at the intermediate low, that we might expect, you know, another, looking at that, 13 inches, right, by 2070. And if you're at the intermediate scenario, you might expect closer to 17, okay? So again, these are decisions that people have to make, but they need to make those decisions based on credible data, and that's what we're trying to do. So, again, why do we care? And I think Ken Kunkel had a good slide in his talk as well. I think everybody in this room knows exactly why we care, right? Because these data are relevant, you know, as we make decisions related to our transportation systems, our energy systems, our stormwater systems, you know, how we kind of build out our shoreline protection, whether it's green or gray, and where we locate, you know, and plan to position critical assets, right, other than those that I've already described. So I think, so that's where the group is now. I expect, you know, we had an iteration and a review of this report. I think all of the reviews are in. We hope to release it very shortly. But the group will move on from that. They're going to try to link those exceedance probabilities that I showed you to specific emissions pathways and different time horizons. You know, in the initial work, because of the way that the legislation was written, that the group was required to talk about 2040 and 2070 as the time horizons, but people have a lot of different needs, obviously, so we'll provide all of the time horizons at decadal intervals, you know, all the way out to 2150. So I think that'll be a valuable tool for a lot of folks in this room. We obviously want to look as well, and I've already started, at the frequency of occurrence of high tide flooding and weather events. I don't need to tell anybody in Southeast Florida, you know, that's something that we have to pay much more attention to. And then we're also doing a careful quality control and analysis of the regional tide gauge time series. So we have already been able to leverage some of this work to densify our tide gauge network around the state. So we'll be working with our NOAA partners actually to do that. I think that'll be helpful and allow us to look more locally at some of the sea level rise issues that may be, again, locally important, things like, you know, having to do with subsidence and things of that nature, right? And then finally, we are working with several of the water management districts, South Florida, St. John's, and Southwest Florida, as well as the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Transportation, to work with a couple of university partners to explore possible contributions to sea level rise that occur as a consequence of coupled to ocean atmospheric dynamics. So that gets to some of the regional scale processes that Ken Kunkel was talking about. So it certainly has implications for rainfall, but it also has implications for sea level rise. So I think it'll be of general interest to folks in both work groups. All right, so before I take any questions, I just wanted to give you a quick update with our rainfall working group, just so you know where we are on that. So that group was initially charged with developing a suite of change factors, right, rainfall change factors for the entire state of Florida. And they essentially looked at the work that was done in the district in collaboration with the USGS and FIU and others, saw a lot of value and merit in that approach. They've taken it, partnered with the USGS to extend the estimation of those change factors statewide. The USGS, in fact, put out a data release already, and that working group is expected to have a draft report later in March. So hopefully Caroline and I can come back and talk about that moving forward. So I think with that said, I'll happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fraser. It was a great presentation. I think it brought a lot of the outputs that are being discussed now at this working group on the sea level rise, and we'll certainly bring the rainfall discussion here to you as well. Thank you again for your time. So questions? We're going around the table. Yes, Amy.
Yeah, I got a lot to say. So Amy Eason, I'm the environmental resource engineer for Martin County. I do Resilient Martin. So a couple things that have come into play. I've kind of kept in touch with the Flood Hub and the people who are part of these working groups, and I just have a suggestion, and maybe I had missed it or something like that, is to make sure that perhaps in these working groups that you have engineers and people in the field that actually use this information and apply it for design and stuff, not just bringing the science, but at least looking at the science and bringing how we would apply it to our designs and how we actually bring that to infrastructure. The other thing I wanted to ask, especially with the sea level rise projections, I know that we start with base year 2000 and then we project from there. Have you done any sort of correlation with, now that we know we have data for 2020, where those are with emissions and, we might be on this path, and I know that we're looking at several different possibilities in the future, but at least having that calibration or at least that knowledge of, hey, where are we hitting it? That's just that, and then I'll have another one later.
That's okay. You can fire away. And really good questions and good points, particularly about participation, right? And so in our rainfall working group, for example, we've got folks that are, certainly I would consider them to be practitioners. We've got water management district, hydrologists / and engineers, right? And that we have folks working with the DOT. We have folks that are part of the Army Corps. So it's not just academics. We got a full suite of partners in here, and we value that input because you're exactly right. It doesn't do us a lot of good if you set a bunch of academics in a room and you start throwing around numbers without really understanding what the implications are for design and planning and things of that nature. So I appreciate your point, and we will strive and endeavor to be as inclusive as we possibly can moving forward. With regard to what we've already observed in sea level rise by 2020, and originally we didn't have that in there, right? We calculated it and we recognized that, yeah, we have, close to 4 inches of sea level rise around the state of Florida. And if you actually look at those projections for 20 to 2020, that's where they are, all right? So I think there's good agreement there. And as we move forward in the next step of this and we look at a more complete suite of time horizons, well, I think we'll get a better idea of what kind of the incremental change in those sea levels looks like. It's clear. I mean, obviously, we have a lot of confidence in what's going to happen in the short time horizons, right? And we all know this, that our confidence becomes less as we extend the time horizons. But it's also, when you look at the median values, which those estimates are, that there's an acceleration of sea level rise as you get closer to the end of, or closer to 2100, right? So, but we'll keep looking at that to kind of calibrate or gauge how well we're doing. So good observation.
Yeah, and the other thing, most infrastructure, has a lifespan between 20 and 50 years. If things are tighter in that 20-year range, then we're able to plan today for the things that we know are going to happen immediately, knowing that anything from 2100 has to be like infrastructure will never, disappear kind of thing. So I appreciate that point. The other thing I did notice is the concentration on intermediate and intermediate low, knowing the legislation now making some changes in those vulnerability assessments as some of us are completing them using NOAA intermediate high, and we're it's interesting to see that now you're highlighting intermediate and intermediate low. But one thing and I didn't ask our legislation person about, was, the correlation between like our CRS program, where they actually ask for sea level rise being at the intermediate high. So we're having all these data sets that are just all over the place, and us as the government entities are going to have to expend more money to keep up with all the changes that are happening in legislation. The last point I want to make is I have struggled with and if you could solve this issue, this would be awesome, is determining the mean high water.
Mm-hmm.
Because I will tell you, and when you're looking at gauges, include some in these intercoastal areas, because they act differently. They have different mean high water. So then when the state comes to us and say, oh, well, now we got to look at, Lake Worth Lagoon and tried it, and I'm like, but my intercoastal system doesn't act that way. So I've had to pull like a local gauge, a USGS gauge that has like 19 years of data, and try to determine the mean high water, because everybody's going to NOAA looking at VDATM, and the VDATM is pulling it from old gauges from the 70s. Nothing's brought up to date. So I'd appreciate it if your group could look into that, especially with the intercoastal areas. Determine a mean high water, or even what the projections may look like.
Yeah, so again, I just want to take a couple minutes to address some of those things. Obviously, super informed, right? And there's a lot going on here. So I'll work backwards, right? So with regard to the issue of relying on sea level or tide gauges, right? We recognize that there are relatively few tide gauges around Florida with substantial kind of temporal records, right? There are a number of other tide gauges floating around that are hosted not necessarily by NOAA, but other entities. As I said before, we're going to densify the tide gauge network to make sure that we have tide gauges that are, kind of up to the appropriate standards, I would say. But it doesn't mean that all of that other information is no good, right? And so the leader of our sea level rise working group is Gary Mitchum, who's one of the world experts, obviously, in this space. And he's already been working with folks in DEP to look at some of those other types of gauges to try to, again, calibrate their utility, I guess, moving forward. But it's important, right? And we recognize that there's a lot of work to be done in that space. That is part of their charge to sort that out, I think, moving forward. So it's coming.
Well, I think it's very important, especially not only from the design arena, right? For instance, I'm an expert witness on a case that is a property that's intercoastal, and the mean high water determination, from the surveyors are coming from the DEM. DEP's got, their way of saying, okay, this is how we're going to determine, and they just pull that data and they say, okay, that's what we're going to use for mean high water. And here I am out there on a high tide day with a surveyor. And it's not even like a big day. It's not, a big tide, and it's a lot higher than what the mean high water is that DEM or FDEP is saying the surveyors shall say this is mean high water. So I think it's a big problem not knowing what that data is or what that information is for us.
Yeah, I think it's, again, we're cognizant of that issue. I mean, we have a kind of a subgroup within that working group who's going to kind of deal very specifically with these high tide types of flooding issue. I mean, there's the two issues here, right? You've got kind of like the chronic, force signal high tide or sea level rise, but you've got the tidal things going on. And so I think that we'll be able to make some progress. I'd be very happy to chat with you and, get your contact information. And again, because we're very collaborative, we're very inclusive. We want to hear from people that need the data, what the concerns are, et cetera. I do want to go back and talk a little bit about your point, the original legislation that established the Flood Hub, made reference to the NOAA's 2017 report, which was different, right, than what they released in 2022. So, science evolves, information gets better, NOAA changed, right? And by the time that the Flood Hub was actually established and implemented, right, and began working, the best information available to us was the assessment that was done in 2022. Unfortunately, there's a lot of language that was still tied to 2017. I don't think people are, I know from working with our state resilience officer and the folks in the DEP, they're cognizant of this problem. You don't want to continually be moving the goalpost, right? But you do want to be able to provide people with the best information available because these decisions have consequences, right? And so I think a lot of these things will be grandfathered in. You're not going to be held responsible for that. So it's just something we have to keep an eye on moving forward. I think there will be options. We're not trying, again, the Flood Hub is not a regulatory entity, right? We're simply trying to provide the best information that we possibly can so people can make defensible decisions moving forward.
Can I add a little bit to that?
What's that?
A little bit to that.
Sure.
To the 2 points. First, the mean high water question. The work that we are doing with the UM now is factoring in wind and ocean conditions that might be interfering with the level that you are seeing there. And I think a portion of the answers to your question might be related to that. We are not doing that outside of the king tide season. The models are running on the back, we were not doing, but this is something that the group was also discussing. Maybe we can understand a little bit better when you are seeing those high water marks, if there is any correlation of what we are seeing on those other predictions. So this is something we can discuss with the work group, and I'll follow up. I have a note here to follow up with them. At least in some of those dates, we might do some exercise to just evaluate what we have there. And then on the scenarios, something that I'm going to say, and I have to give the whole credit to where we are now to Joaquin. When I know exactly the point that you were saying. It's very expensive to run models. It's very expensive to find the right combination of future scenarios that you want to run. Right now, we are talking about like 12 to 16 model runs when we combine those scenarios for one simple analysis, which is incredibly expensive, time-consuming. We did not even, we're talking about rainfall. If you want to do a 2 future rainfall scenarios, we're going to at least double this. So I do have one scope of work that we're writing that we got to 32 as the basic scenarios. That's what we have with ERDC right now. But it's expensive, it's time-consuming, and we cannot just afford to be doing all of those. But Joaquin, when he came up with +1, +2, +3, I think he got a little bit away from a determined curve and a point in time, and he was smart to pick a range that was large enough that would allow us to kind of navigate as we are seeing the science evolving. I mean, the science is evolving, and this is good. We have a much lower range that we had in 2017, the 2022. I have a slide that shows that, and for me, this is excellent. This is the science is progressing, and we have a lower range. And we are within the range, which is also another big finding. We are within the original range. It's not that we are going up and down outside of the original range. So this is excellent. However, I think it's hard to navigate, and especially when you're dealing with those large infrastructure projects. Here, we're really talking about CNSF system, those massive canals, massive pumps. We certainly need to look a little bit further than what we are seeing to occur right now. So it's a decision that is based on the type of work that you are doing. I'm sure we're going to continue to look at the +3, even though it's a little bit beyond what we have seen just now. The +1 and +2 are really within what we have been seeing here right now on the 2022 curves and what the Florida Flood Hub is showing. But of course, being this agency that has this massive infrastructure what we have today is lasting for 70 years already. We need to look further, and we need to be careful on what kind of risk we want to take. When I look at 5% risk, I look at a big risk from a water management perspective, a big water manager. But of course, this is different when you were kind of hardening a building. Or it's even different if you were building a seawall, for instance, that you know you can build on top. This is adaptability that we need to build to the projects. Now, this is a challenge. We don't have all this flexibility when we are designing those projects, but we need to build in flexibility, and we need to understand that, of course, we also don't want to overspend. That's a serious question. We don't want to design for something that is not going to arrive. So I think that's a little bit of where we are, but I just wanted to add to the discussion because that's a significant discussion. And I know all the counties are struggling with this. Counties and municipalities are struggling with what we have right now. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask about particularly your data sources, because just focusing on the intermediate high, which, of course, within the compact, the 4 counties within Southeast Florida, I was looking at the 2070, and it was showing 30 inches, but our, using like NOAA's intermediate high sea level rise ranges, we use 40. And so I wanted to ask you about that, because we've been using this, especially since, 2019, for our unified sea level rise projection scenarios, and, especially given, recent legislation from the national standpoint, even, here in the state, we have a lot of our infrastructure, a lot of our adaptation plans, use, the 40-inch NOAA intermediate high, and so that's basically a difference of 10 inches. And so I wanted to know, like, your methodology that, like, basically has that level of difference between NOAA's and your flood scenarios.
Sure. So, and again, this is a question that we get a lot, and I think we're going to have to do a better job at the Flood Hub kind of explaining how things have evolved over time, right? So, if you were incorporating those scenarios in 2019, they were probably based on the NOAA 2017 report, right? And so that report has evolved, right? Obviously in 2022, they have they modified the findings, right, based on more recent data. So even in the NOAA 2022 report, the values would have gone down relative to what you were referencing, right, that you were using in 2019. And so the Flood Hub's estimates, right, again, they were done using the exact same information, the raw data that the NOAA folks used in their 2022 report. And so the simple matter is that if you look at the most likely emission pathway or temperature scenario by the end of the century, we're approaching 3 degrees C, right? So that's the scenario that the group chose to look at, or at least the emission pathway or temperature scenario. With regard to the sea level rise scenarios, intermediate, low, and intermediate were the ones that they chose, in large part because if you looked at the exceedance probabilities, that the low scenario had a very, very high likelihood of exceeding that in almost every case, right? Almost greater than 99% of doing that. When you looked at the intermediate high in the high scenarios, kind of the opposite extreme, there's less than, generally less than 1% chance or so of achieving that. So the most likely scenarios, right, that you might want to make a decision on are intermediate, low, or intermediate. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider the others, right? And this is super, super important, right? We're not telling anybody what to do. I mean, you may be incredibly risk averse, right, in a particular project, whatever it might be. Let's say you're building a nuclear power plant somewhere, right, and you want it to be bomb-proof, right? So you may opt for a different scenario. We're not, we're not telling people what to do. We're just giving you information that allows you to evaluate, again, the potential magnitude of the risk, the likelihood or probability that you might achieve that, right? So you can make credible decisions. And in some cases, some decision makers may opt to incorporate actions, right, that are less risk averse than others. And that's okay. It's just a trade-off that you have to make. As Carolina pointed out, we all have limited resources, right? And we want to be able to make the best use of those funds to protect our infrastructure, our people, their livelihoods, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes there's a big difference, right, in designing a structure that is maybe just 1 inch difference, right? It may be millions or tens of millions of dollars, for example. And again, those are hard decisions, right? But people have to make them. We're just trying to provide an information and a decision matrix that allows you to make good decisions. Carolina's not here. I'll go ahead. Go ahead and take that.
Wow. Just to that point, and I appreciate and empathize with the presentation of information for others to make decisions. The presentation of the information itself can be really important, and in those. Yeah, thanks. And we talk about mean high or intermediate ranges, and we don't talk about the punctuated events on top of them, particularly, most of our communities, not just in South Florida, but in coastal New Jersey or in mid-Atlantic ranges, are seeing moderate rains and moderate tides creating significant flooding. So the wind events that Carolina was talking about are a huge factor, the storm events and the precipitation. So when you're designing for the future, being able to overlay those events on top of that elevation is a really critical thing for engineers and decision makers to know.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? Again, we're right now focused kind of again on the primary force signal here. This is, just general sea level rise. But we know that even small changes in high tide flooding events, right, or the frequency of high tide flooding can have profound consequences on our, businesses or ability to navigate in any particular geographic space, right? And so we get that. It's a next step for this group. And they've had experience working in this kind of high tide flooding space, and we can simply layer that on and provide more or finer resolution that I think will be a tremendous value to stakeholders around the state. So again, a great observation, a good question.
Nancy Gassman, City of Fort Lauderdale. One of the things that concerns me is that the state of Florida is a big place. Mm-hmm. We've got a huge coastline. One coastline is influenced by the Atlantic, the other is influenced by the Gulf. And specifically in the Southeast Florida area, the Gulf Stream is a critical driving factor for how we are experiencing sea level rise. How does your group look at regional differences within the state regarding those projections?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we recognize that as kind of an important need of study, right? So when we look at how these projections are made, right, they're driven by global climate models, right, that have spatial resolution of like hundreds of kilometers, right? And we rely on that downscaled information, obviously, to look at things like precipitation and things that Dr. Kunkel was referring to. But one of the things that the work group discussed was the fact that when you looked at all around the state of Florida, the sea level rise, that the estimates align very well with the global mean values, right? And so that implies one of two things. One is either that these regional processes that you're talking about aren't important, right, or they're not influencing things, or they're not captured, right? And so there are two alternatives there. And we recognize that the Gulf Stream, similarly the loop current in the Gulf of Mexico, may have pretty significant consequences for sea level rise, right? And so we are, as I said before, and if I wasn't clear, we're working and partnering right now with the water management districts, the USGS, Department of Transportation, working with investigators at the University of Miami, and Florida State University, specifically to look at those regional scale coupled ocean atmospheric processes that will allow us to incorporate that information into these estimates moving forward. So it's a great question, it's a great observation, we didn't ignore it, but the science just hasn't evolved there yet.
Any more questions, any more comments? I just want to show one slide here, come back. Is the third one. I think it's a good one here. That will help answer the question.
Yep.
Tom, what you have there is 2060, okay? So the two bars on the right is 2060 projections. The left one is the 2017 NOAA projection. The right one is 2022 NOAA projection. This is what I have been saying. The science has evolved and the range has been reduced. So what was intermediate high or intermediate low or intermediate in the previous one, this is what we are seeing here on the new 2022 one for 2060. So I know, and I'm so sad that Jim is not here, or Jennifer, or Megan, that could talk on behalf of the compact, but their curve that they have there to 2019 is still based on the 2017 NOAA curve, and they are working to update the sea level rise projections that they have, but they have been waiting also to coordinate with the state. That's what has been discussed. So, I mean, it doesn't help to have an updated projection from the compact now along with the state. So I wish that somebody else, I don't know if one of the counties would like to talk about this and just confirm. I hate to talk on behalf of the compact here, not being a member, but I don't know, Nancy or Reg, if you have anything to add, but they will be updating the sea level rise projections.
Can I add one thing real quick, Caroline? I mean, and I really appreciate, Carolina, that you bringing this slide up, right? Because I think it's an important one, right? You know, I talked about the evolution and the maturation of science. We're going to get better, you know, as more information comes in. But what this emphasizes to me that because we have limited resources, right, and we're thinking about how we're going to design specific projects, whatever they are, whether they're roads or bridges or seawalls, it doesn't really matter. But what it means to me is that we should be thinking about, can we be adaptable and flexible in that approach, right? So, you know, it might be a sounder way, right, to make decisions with regard to the limited or investment of the limited resources that you might have.
So the compact is planning to update their projection. They'll convene and go through their regular process of pulling in all the various experts and then looking at some of those local factors that we were talking about when we decide how to pick and choose which projection we want to look at. But the compact has always provided that planning range as a range and not as a single projection. And so it's really up to those who use that projection where their risk tolerance is, what infrastructure at what life cycle that they are choosing to look at. The impression that I'm getting is that they're not going to see a significant change in the projections at this new level, even though it's been 4 years since we saw the last projection. But I'll let the committee work through that. And having the additional information from the state will be helpful for them to make those decisions.
Great. Thank you for that input.
I think we're good. Any more questions, final comments as we move in? Great, thank you. We have two very important topics to cover still today, and I'm going to start with the next one, which is the core, our friends here from the core that we have been working on the CNSF with resiliency study and the integration. So I'll invite Tim Geis and Eva to please join us and provide an update on those studies.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Geis, and I'm the Resilient Senior Project Manager with the Jacksonville District of the Corps of Engineers. We're going to talk a little bit about the CNSF flood resiliency study, and then kind of a general update on some of the other projects we have that fall under our integration effort in Southeast Florida. All right, so we've talked about the CNSF flood resiliency study before in this forum, and it's focused in southern Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade counties. So for the rest of you that are not living in there, a lot of what we're doing there really setting the groundwork for future resilience work, especially with the comprehensive CNSF study. So I've heard a lot of the discussion this morning, especially on the climate projections, and some of the things we're doing on this study will feed directly into the comp study, and hopefully as the science continues to evolve, we'll continue to evolve our methodology. But current kind of status, and I'll get into kind of a little bit of a tie-in here in a second. When we had last talked, we had submitted what we call a vertical team alignment memorandum, and that's generally how we get processed our scope, schedule, and budget for our project. And that had been submitted up to headquarters, and we had a briefing with headquarters in January where we presented a $19.3 million scope over 6 years, focused on roughly 18 locations within Broward and Dade counties to focus that effort on. We did not get a thumbs up at that meeting, and were asked to take a look at what we were doing to kind of right-size our scope. Part of that, and it gets with different policies, which I've heard mentioned here today. We deal with that at all different levels. And in this one is really that changed kind of what our level of effort would be, is focused on design. As you know, once we have a project study, it goes to Congress for authorization, and we want to have a really solid feel for what the total cost of that project would be once it goes for authorization. So part of that means making sure we do enough design during the study phase to have a really good feel for that cost with a fairly low risk that it's going to increase once we get into construction. So adding that additional design effort into the studies creates a more substantial cost, which we're seeing across the board. So again, limited resources, and what can we do to get the most benefit within those limited resources? So that's kind of where we are right now, is trying to determine what is the right scope that we can get the most benefit out of this effort. And while I'm on that, I do want to recognize, and Carolina brought this up earlier, with the support from the South Florida Regional Planning Council and the recommendation to both Dade and Broward County to bring in resources to support this effort. And I think that's really appreciated. I think at all levels, that commitment from a resource perspective from the county and what the state is appropriating towards resilience projects really goes a long way at the national level when our leadership and in Congress looks at investment on projects. So, they're looking at investments all over the country, so when they see a project come in at a certain dollar amount, they have to weigh that as an investment compared to things going on other places. So that commitment from the local communities and from the state goes a really long way. So I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge that support. So where are we right now, and what are we working on? As Carolina mentioned, we have a workshop scheduled for next Thursday and Friday focused on performance evaluation. How are we going to take modeled data, look at that, and evaluate, in particular in the near term, how we prioritize which locations we're going to carry forward for that detailed study, and then how do we carry the rest of those locations forward as well. So that workshop next week, I think, is going to be really important as we move into starting to look at that model data. The other really important thing that's ongoing now is with the model development, as was mentioned, with limited resources, you can't do suites of hundreds of different combinations of model runs. So our teams come up with a suite of 8 different model runs, combinations of sea level rise and rainfall, to try to simulate as much as you can of that space that we're going to be looking at. And what they're really working through right now is it ties into what we talked about with compound flooding, different drivers of flooding, and what is the overall risk with both of those and that frequency. How do we determine that frequency? So that's what the team's really working through right now, because then that feeds into our economic models and how they look at potential damages from these different events. a decision on that one will be forthcoming. We'll be presenting the model data from the 4 Mike Xi, Mike 11, or Mike Hydro models for the 4 regions you see on the screen here in April is the target for that mid-April to bring that model data out to folks to start looking at. And that at that time we'll have a decision on the frequency and how we decided to do that as part of this study, which I'm sure will stimulate lots of discussions and feed into what we'll do in future studies as well. Put the glasses on because, like Tom, my eyes are not as good as they used to be. All right, so what does all that lead to? The workshop next week, a meeting in April to talk about model data, will then feed into a discussion with all of our stakeholder groups on what is the prioritization, what is our revised VTAM or revised scope schedule budget going to look like. So the target to have those discussions is in the May and June timeframe, which will then feed into us providing a response back to headquarters in July, August timeframe this year. So that's the where we are on the CNSF flood resiliency study. Lots of work going on. The team is diligently cranking out model runs, looking at that data, and look forward to sharing that with everyone in the coming months. All right, I'm going to take a step back now and talk a little bit about, I know there's a lot going on this slide, but not a lot of words, which is a good thing, right? It's pictures. So what we're trying to get across with this slide is kind of our overall integration effort. We've talked about this. We have a lot of work going on at the federal level with the Corps that really feeds into building community resilience. And what we've highlighted here is just in Southeast Florida, but I've got a bigger map that kind of shows all the projects we've got going on around the Water Management District footprint. Really kind of shows how our projects that we have at the federal level feed into overall resiliency within the state. The umbrella diagram you have there on the right side just kind of shows what our integration efforts focused on. As you can imagine, all these different projects have different purposes, and trying to make them work together to communicate, to talk, is what that integration effort's really all about. Making sure we understand what each one's doing, opportunities for collaboration, opportunities to share information across projects and really come out with hopefully better results from all of these different projects. And these range from coastal projects, which you can see on the map on the left, are focused kind of in the orange and red colors right there along the coast that provide the resiliency projects for the coastal systems, the beaches, the coastal communities, resilience against coastal storm risk. And then you can kind of see as you move inland into some of the other areas, we've got projects like BBC that are focusing on ecosystem restoration, which really look at water storage, water movement, distribution, both for the environment and for other uses that are on that regional scale. And then, of course, our flood resiliency study covers that entire area in Broward and Dade counties in the southern part of Palm Beach. So you can see they really kind of shows how they all overlap each other. How do these projects touch each other, and why it's important that we talk across projects and really try to integrate them as much as we can within limited resources, of course. So I wanted to do just a real quick update on a few of the projects, give you a feel for where they stand, and then I'll open it up for questions. So the first one is the Miami-Dade Back Bay, which is focused kind of on that coastal area, the Back Bay between the barrier islands and the main inland coast. Their study is targeting a chief's report, so a report that will go to Congress this year. They are looking at having a draft report out on the street for everyone to review in April. And that report will include 3 kind of main pieces. The first will be recommendations for critical infrastructure and non-structural solutions. So not the big infrastructure projects, which you see, pump stations, seawalls, things like that, but non-structural options. It will also have what's kind of unique, a recommendation for a pilot program to look at nature-based solutions. And what that essentially is an authorization to go out and do pilot studies for nature-based solutions along the coast to understand how those can really play into coastal resiliency and inform future work. And then the third piece will be the framework for a follow-on feasibility study to look at more of that structural solution that would come into play, those big structures that would prevent more of those damages. So kind of shows you within the resources that we have how we're trying to be adaptable to implement projects in a little bit different way to get near-term benefits, but also keep a focus on longer-term benefits as well. Another big project ongoing is the Miami Harbor Improvement Study, looking at improving the capacity for the Miami Harbor for the larger ships. Resiliency, as you know, is not just the water, it's also our economies and our communities, but all of that really ties together. So the navigation study, they're in the process of looking at adapting their scope, going through a project to develop a new schedule and budget for a new VTAM, that vertical team alignment memorandum, to right size their scope, really focusing on the interior part of the harbor. Don't have a schedule on that yet, but the team is working on that with the non-federal sponsor to try to come up with that right size scope. That said, they're also always looking at opportunities for beneficial use of materials. So that's where the coordination and that integration comes into play, is we generate something that may not be useful in one project that could be used in another project. So that's why it's really important that we're talking across projects to be able to try to recognize those opportunities. And then the other big project going on is BB-SEER, and I'm going to have to call on a lifeline here just for a quick update on status of that. Ava, if you don't mind.
I don't mind. Good morning, everybody. Ava Velez with the Corps of Engineers. So to orient you on the slide, on the left you have a map, and just to make sure you're tracking the location of the Biscayne Bay and Southeastern Everglades Restoration Project or study. So this is a study under the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan that the team has been working on over the last several years, inclusive of the South Florida Water Management District, as well as Miami-Dade County, as well as many, many other federal, tribal, state, and local organizations. And so we're lucky that we have a ton of engagement and interest in that study. And so on the left-hand side there in the map, you'll notice there's a white dashed outline. I think that's white. That is the study boundary. So essentially, it is all of Miami-Dade County, the human environment of all of Miami-Dade County. You'll note that it has Everglades National Park to its west and Biscayne National Park to its east. So there's an enormous federal interest to talk in Corps speak. And so we've been working as a team over the last several years to try to answer the question that we all have been trying to wrestle down to the ground, which is, how do you do ecosystem restoration of freshwater and estuarine ecosystems while the sea level is changing, right? When you've got the tidal piece moving inland, rising over time, how do you do that? How do you capture the freshwater in order to deliver it to the right spot? And then how do you acknowledge that your habitats are changing, but also improving them? Like, how do you do that? It's a hard question. I'm proud to say this team has done an incredible scientific collaboration. So if I have to say of the status of the study, I am the most proud of the scientific collaboration that has happened in BB-SEER. In addition to all the program managers and modelers and engineers that are working on it, the scientific community, we asked them for help, and everyone came to the table, whether it's FIU, whether it's the National Park Service, everybody came to the table to answer this hard question. And so One of the things they developed is the concept of adaptive foundational resilience. And they created a performance measure in order to first understand the current condition and then think about how to improve it. Like, how do you think about evolving ecosystems, recognize that that's happening, and then embrace it, and then make sure that you protect those habitats and improve it. So that's the term that the scientists came up with, adaptive foundational resilience. And the idea would be that when you capture the fresh water from the places it's not needed, convey it through the urban middle, which is, if you can point to the ridge that's kind of along the middle there, right? You've got water sources in the northwest and the west. You've got a hydraulic ridge in the middle. You've got to convey it through the hydraulic ridge, which is really challenging, and then distribute it along the coast. If you get to do all that, and you get to put the fresh water where it's more beneficial, the additional fresh water aids in the accretion or the rising of the ground in such a way that those natural habitats that topographically come up as well as sea level change. And so there's a scientific process there that happens, right? When you bring the fresh water to the right spot, the land accretes, the land grows with sea level change, and you're able to then adapt. The foundation is more resilient. The ground rises with sea level change. That's one of the big things that the team has done here. And everyone's kind of on board, which is a big deal. And so that then brings me to the status. The team has narrowed down the alternatives, meaning the ideas of how to solve this big question we have, to two. There are two alternatives that have been under evaluation and an enormous amount of modeling that has been completed, and it's in the process of being released and reviewed and understood and discussed at the project delivery team. That's where we are. We're down to two alternatives. And the next big step would be to pick the tentatively selected plan, the singular one. We're not there yet. We've got more work to do. And just as Tim was talking about scope, schedule, and budget challenges, we also have that with BBCR. And so we're in the process of asking for permission to spend more time and more money to complete the study. So that's a lot of words, and hopefully that was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to show my next slide unless Carolina doesn't let me do it. Oh, that's right, because she had one too. So we are also hiring. So if you know any great candidates who are wanting to work on some of our resilience efforts, and those could be coastal ecosystem, flood risk management, water supply. We do all of that. So always looking for great people to work with the Corps. Any questions? Everybody's starting to get hungry, I think. All right. Hearing none. Are you asking a question, or are you going to start speaking?
No,
Chris?
I'm going to thank you for Carolina for your presentations, very informative. And I'm going to introduce the next section, which is the 2024 wet season flood information resources, and myself, Christine Carlson. I'm with the Water Management District. I'm the geospatial architect. So I'm going to go up to the podium.
Yes, Carolina has just stepped out, but yes, we're transitioning to Christine and her team. Thank you.
Are you going to put it in presentation? Oh, it's already in presentation. Thank you. So today's presentation is a three-part presentation. I will be talking about the South Florida Flood Information Resource, which we talked about and demoed last in the November forum. I'm sorry. And then I'll be talking about tools and training that we're going to put in place for the 2024 wet season. So the second presentation is from a vendor that we just this year entered into a subscription with, and it's ISI, their Flood Insights for Florida, and I'll do a more extensive introduction when we get to that part of the presentation. And then our third presentation is from IC Change about flood tracking in the city of Miami-Dade and Miami-Dade County. So at our last forum, we introduced the South Florida Flood Information resource, and the purpose of this resource is to consolidate and centralize information to make it accessible to the public and to local governments. We have currently out on the site, there are public tools, the first of which is the local contact viewer, which allows residents throughout South Florida to enter their address, and the information that will be returned is a website or a phone number. It will tell you on which drainage authority that address is within. The second tool is the South Florida Water Management District flood observation tool, which we are making available for regional use. We understand that some municipalities, counties, and other entities have their own. This is to fill the void and the gap to places that don't have that information. Ideally, we would like to be able to provide a resource where we can observe all of the emerging flooding conditions, and we also want to provide that insight to real-time water managers. Right now, there is a public information viewer that is available on the site. This has the comprehensive, this represents the current state of our collection of historic information on flood events. This will be replaced in the wet season with a current event viewer. The purpose of the current event viewer will be you could go out there and you wouldn't see any reports, but when there is something beginning to emerge, you should begin to see the real-time reports that we're getting in. Now, this will only happen with help from you, because if we don't have people submitting these flood reports, we don't have the ability to monitor emerging flood conditions. So our big push this wet season is to request promotion for in use of this tool in those areas where there's not already an existing tool. Also, with this wet season, we're introducing South Florida Flood Information Resource Accounts. This account is intended to provide local governments secure access to content that may be licensed or someone has shared with us but has requested we not share. So when we are ready to begin initiating creation of these resource accounts, we're going to send out an email with instructions. As part of that, you will have to accept terms and conditions associated with the ESRI hub, but also associated with the South Florida Water Management District's agreements with other vendors like ISI. On the secure side of the application or the resource, you'll find a high watermark survey. I said Silver Jacket derived, I should have said FDA derived. We have Daniel Rydell, the GIS manager from Florida Department of Emergency Management here today. I have used your survey as the basis, but I'm trying to take the account creation and management off your plate and put it onto our plate. We'll be able to share our data with you. It'll map directly to your survey. We also will be able to provide access according to our terms and conditions to some flood reports in that are being collected under restricted sharing policies. We also will be releasing an application that will be an improvement on that viewer. Right now, if you go out and you look at that viewer, I've been told over and over again it's overwhelming because there's so much in there. So we have built an application that is intended to be an experience to allow you to explore the information that we have in the repository. So when you do get your resource account, you'll have access to the high watermark survey. If you have been trained, and so you all should have a QR code on your table someplace with a bunch of dates, field station names and dates. This season, we are offering
training at our field stations on how to identify and mark high water marks. It's our survey section administrator will be leading that training along with some of our GIS support to teach you how to use the Survey 123. Once you've completed that training, we will provide you access to our high water mark survey. And what we're requesting is those people that receive training use that to, when they go out to do reconnaissance after an event, to submit that information to us. We've added a height above ground to it. This is something the USGS does. That allows us to quickly use that information to come up with an estimated elevation. And if we see that it's necessary to go out and survey, then we'll send out surveyors, or we'll request that you send out surveyors. So we're not necessarily strictly saying that we want to give you training. We want to make sure that you understand the methodology we're asking you to use to identify, mark, and submit that to us. We just want to be able to begin receiving information on where we do see flooding and extent of flooding that is beyond normal conditions. I'm going to skip forward real quick, and then I'm going to go backwards. The ultimate objective in collecting these high water marks, and also in using services like ISI, which will be the next presentation, or we're trying to understand flood extent. We've identified some initial flood-prone areas. These are areas that we want to prioritize to evaluate for monitoring gaps and deployment of additional sensors, and prioritize for satellite or radar image acquisition. But what we're really trying to get at is what's shown here in blue. These are areas that flooded during Ian, and this information allows us to determine what is the source of this for mitigation planning. Is this just a low relief area, and it's an area that's always going to collect precipitation because water flows downhill, or is it associated with a secondary system, and does it imply that secondary system is not necessarily working as expected, or is it part of the water management system, and could it be used to inform some of the efforts like those being done by the Corps and by the Water Management District within the Flood Protection Level of Service program? Going back to what the application, these are mock-ups. It's still under development, but generally, there will be a photo viewer. This is important, as we've heard over and over again, for municipalities and other parties that need to document recurrent flooding in an area. This will allow you to filter to an extent and then look at those observations, and the photo will come up. And then we're working on the capability to then be able to download both the location and the photo URL, which is out in public as our storage, so that you can get that documentation and use it for your grant purposes. The current event viewer that's within the application, this one would have that secure information in it. The public viewer will not have secure information. The current event viewer tab in this application would include secured information. We have the flood observation viewer, which is just allows you to look over our entire collection that we have to date. You can filter on year or by event, and then the bar charts here allow you to click on them and then zoom to and access related to an event in a watershed, or what you don't see down there is a tab that says county, municipalities, drainage district, or flood-prone area. So this is a way that you can go into the repository and look at these things as a whole within an area of interest, or you can look specifically to an event. And again, we will be building in the download capability so you can leave with those records and use them how you may want to. This is the high watermark viewer. It allows us the same functionality of looking things on a watershed, a county, an event basis, and then to walk away with the information you need. Right now for Ian, I brought in the state's high water marks. Eventually, Daniel, I don't want to bring yours. I want to have your service layer in here, and I also want to have USGS's service layer in there. So that's where we'll go. That's the path in the future. We're not fully there yet. So here is our flood-prone area summary. What this allows you to do is in these areas that we've identified as preliminarily flood-prone, you can see that you can select a flood-prone area, and then here is the history based on the documentation we have that we've used to say that this is flood-prone because we have documented impacts from events in, I have to put my glasses on, Francis, Jean, Isaac, and Ian. With that, I'm going to lead into the next presentation. We have Mike Bennett, who is the head of government solutions in North America for ISI. For nearly 15 years, Mike has worked in the weather and natural disaster industry, including operational forecasting, hazard communication and broadcast, meteorology, and peril risk assessment and post-event forensics in the insurtech space. In his current role, Mike works with governments and public sector organizations to understand and ingest ISI's natural catastrophic insights, to improve disaster response efforts, humanitarian aid and hazard communications, and fuel alternative risk transfer projects focused around improving recovery outcomes for disaster survivors. While at ISI, Mike has helped lead the development of the monitoring, forecasting, and targeting operations for ISI at Flood Insights, the process for which is the precursor for the flood early warning. So Mike, I invite you to present to us up here. And we, the Water Management District, after obtaining data from ISI for Ian, decided that we thought that this was a good service that was adding value beyond our gauge network. And so this is someone we're working with now, and we wanted to share this product with you.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Good morning. I think it's still morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'll try to zip through this. I think we have about 10 minutes or so allotted to this. So if I'm speaking really fast, I'm trying to squeeze in a lot of good information, but we'll be around if you have any questions. And of course, I'm sure you get direct questions to Chris if we run out of time as well. So I want to talk to you about who ISI is a little bit, how we operate, and what we actually do in the natural disaster space. So there's a small group from ISI here that represents part of ISI North America on the government solutions side, which is part of a larger ISI North America, which is part of a even larger ISI itself. ISI was founded almost a decade ago, actually as a company based in Finland. We actually have 2 U.S. subsidiaries, though, based in California that myself, my colleagues, Mark, Priscilla, and Jen back there all report into. About 650 people at the company. Most of those people, technologists, engineers, focus on developing the satellites and the synthetic aperture radar data that underlies them. That means building them, sourcing the componentry for the software parts of it, maintaining the satellites in space, operating them as well. You'd be surprised at just how many people are needed to get a satellite up in space and make sure it stays in space. There's a large part of the company, obviously, that works on that. The part of the company that we sit at is focused on how we take that satellite data and how we utilize it to help people before, during, and after disasters, particularly in the context for which we're here today, around floods. So globally, we've mapped over 150 floods in the last 2.5 years or so, 50 floods in the USA alone, number of those, of course, in Florida, the most recent being Idalia, and then before that, of course, Hurricane Ian. I would imagine not many people are familiar with synthetic aperture radar. It's kind of a niche part of Earth observation data. The biggest benefit to SAR data is that it can see through clouds and it can see at night. And so we don't have to wait for the skies to clear. We don't have to wait for the rain to stop. We don't have to wait for the storm to move away. We truly try to capture as close to the peak of flooding as we can to make sure that we are delivering an observational-based analysis that captures the maximum flood extent and maximum flood depth. So a little bit about the constellation itself. We launched our first satellite back in 2018. We've now launched more than 30 satellites. We have several more, I think, plans for early next month. That all kind of depends on when SpaceX decides to get the next transporter up there. With that amount of satellites, with the number of satellites that we've launched in that given area across Florida, so across the peninsula, for example, we generally have about 10 to 12 passes a day, but it goes up to 20 depending on the day. The orbits themselves are not exactly fixed, so each day may vary a bit. The revisit time itself, give or take 3 or 4 hours, but again, because those orbits aren't fixed, you may have 15-minute gaps between some revisits where you could spread them out a little bit, and you may have a little bit more than 3 to 4 hours between the revisits. So what I mentioned that I want to focus in on here is around flood insights. So how do we use that synthetic aperture radar data to be able to look at water on the ground and be able to then analyze that water and deliver that geospatial file, what we delivered for Hurricane Ian and what we aim to deliver for any impactful floods, which is the maximum flood extent and maximum flood depth. So this is a look at what that looks like within a geospatial platform. The darker shades of blue here represent deeper waters, lighter shades of blue, obviously shallower waters, and the overall extent of the blue is the overall maximum flood extent. What we're doing is a multi-sourced, observational-based approach that uses space-based, aerial-based, and ground-based data. So we are taking in our satellite data, but that is a component of the analysis. We also take in aerial data. We take in other publicly available satellite data, and we take in ground-based data. And this is where we'll get into in a little bit, where I think some of the data that's being pulled through South Florida Water Management District, whether via the extensive sensor network or the observation data, could also be used to help improve our analysis. We then deliver that analysis at roughly 4-meter resolution, which allows us to deliver flood extent and flood depth that gets at the individual building structure level. And because we're delivering it in near real time, it enables citywide, district-wide, statewide impact analyses in near real time. I should also say on this map here, you're seeing different colors, and I recognize the screens maybe for some are a little bit small, so I'll walk you through. Those are building footprints. We utilize the USA Structures database, so USGS FEMA database on building structures, and we've just bucketed them in this category here, low, medium, and high as far as how deep the waters go. I think low, 0 to 2 feet, medium, 2 to 5 feet, and high, above 5 feet. In order to do what we do, we have to know where it's going to flood. We have to be able to point our satellites. They're not what's considered passive satellites, where they're just constantly collecting data as they go. But because we have so many of these satellites, we have to target them at the actual natural disaster that's occurring. So in this case, flood. And so for that, we have to bring in other data samples, other data sets, I should say, to assess where the greatest risk for flood is going to be. So we've got a team of meteorologists at ISI who are forecasting globally each and every day and meeting with our satellite operations team to be able to look at ensemble and deterministic forecast members, National Weather Service flood warnings, flash flood emergencies, et cetera, National Hurricane Center data sets, river and tidal gauges, river and tidal forecasts, as well as flood propensity and flood prediction models. So we have our own bespoke flood prediction model that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and that also plays a big part to where we aim to capture our imagery. The bottom right-hand side that you see there, that's an actual image of what our satellite tasking software looks like. We line up those image acquisitions, again, based on all of those other data inputs, and then what's spit out initially is our observed flood impact report, or daily flood events report, I should say. Within that, it details where are we looking for flooding globally, what are the expectations of that flooding, do we expect severe flooding, do we expect less widespread flooding, Where are we actually observing flooding globally? Where are we analyzing flooding? And where are we closing our workflows on flooding? So the monitoring component of our flood insights process there on the left-hand side, that's occurring at all times. Our meteorologists, we take a follow the sun approach, and so we've got them kind of globally stationed to make sure that they can pick up where the last one left off. Once they've set up the actual acquisitions and we've started to identify that flooding is indeed occurring in a particular area, we're collecting the data. So we are downlinking and collecting all of that synthetic aperture radar data, but we're also collecting a ton of auxiliary flood data. So again, maybe hard to see here, but the image that is just below that globe is a news report. And within that news report, you could see flooding up to the base of a sign in a shopping center. That shopping center then, we are geolocating where the sign is. We are identifying within that image the depth of the water and using that as a point of calibration within the actual analysis itself. So that when we get to the analysis, it's this multi-sourced approach that starts with the satellite data, that synthetic aperture radar data to help draw the overall flood extent, and then these individually calibrated data points, these geolocated data points that help to overall make sure that we are aligned on the flood extent, the maximum flood extent, as well as get closer to what the maximum flood depth is. Any other data sources that we're bringing in all go into this analysis as well. So I mentioned if there's publicly available satellite data or publicly available aerial imagery data via NOAA or Civil Air Patrol or something that helps us to get at a better answer of what the maximum flood extent and maximum flood depth is, we'll bring that in. And then as well, we've kind of drawn a line here of where we see the South Florida Water Management District observation data playing. And that includes the extensive sensor network data that we talked about. Once we have that analysis, then we aim to deliver that, our flood insights, which is the flood depth raster file, flood extent vector file, some associated metadata, and some release notes around confidence intervals for each of those within 24 hours of that activation on flood. So this is an example of what it looked like for Hurricane Ian. I mentioned we've done several, I think 5 analyses in Florida. Hurricane Ian was obviously the most impactful that we've done. We covered close to 2,000 square miles in the flood extent, and using USA Structures, which is not a perfect building footprint database, but pretty good, we're at close to, or I think just over 350,000 buildings that were impacted. This is a timeline. I won't go too deep into this, but the key point here is, one, there is a threshold to our analysis. So I lived in Tampa for a number of years. I'm aware of the monsoon season here, the wet season, and what that can do to local roadways, how that impacts infrastructure. We don't aim to analyze each and every summertime thunderstorm, each and every storm that may cause some roadways to flood. Part of that is because it's hard to make sure that we align the satellites to capture each one of those and to predict exactly where those are going to occur. But also just from a capacity standpoint, there's a manual effort in being able to analyze these and a bandwidth effort. And so it becomes an issue if we are aiming to do an analysis on each one of those. What we look for is a threshold of about 100 buildings impacted with at least a foot of water at the building level. And that becomes our threshold for initiating an analysis. Now, of course, we need to have evidence of that for us to initiate. We need to observe that either via the satellites or observe that via those auxiliary data points. Once we spit that out within 24 hours, the other important thing to keep in mind here is that's our first release. As the flood evolves, which is what happened with Hurricane Ian, or as more data comes online, we continue to update that with additional releases. So with Hurricane Ian, I think we actually had 8 releases delivered over the course of 8 or 9 days. Each one of those releases either had the evolution of the flood, so initially the storm surge flooding, and then the inland flooding, and then the back end surge flooding on the other side of Florida, and then more storm surge flooding as it headed into the Carolinas, and more freshwater flooding back home in Florida as well. And we keep going until we've exhausted resources. Either the flooding no longer exists or we're no longer getting additional data that indicates that our flood analysis looks different. On the delivery options, the way that we deliver the data, we try to make it easy to get the data into the hands of our end users, into the hands of South Florida Water Management District as quickly as possible. So either via DocSend or Send Safely, or a cloud sync via S3 or Azure, or we work through Esri as well. So our data is available ArcGIS Online or group sharing. And eventually, as Chris pointed out, the South Florida Water Management District Hub. I just wanted to end on this, just where the use cases are, because we operate across a number of different government agencies, and the government agencies are focused on different aspects of flood, different aspects of response, different aspects of recovery, mitigation, and ultimately preparedness and resilience and mitigation. I won't read each one of these. I'll just kind of leave this up here for a second, but just it's always interesting to come to a meeting that is focused on a different use case than the meeting I was at yesterday or the day before, or the use cases that, for example, the federal government, certain aspects of FEMA may be focused in on. So I've appreciated the conversation today. Thank you again for having me here, and open to any questions. Close to 10 minutes?
Yeah, you were good. We need to hold the questions though till the end of the session. So our last presentation in the series is Julia Kamar-Drapkin like napkin. IC Change serves as the flood reporting tool for the city of Miami and now Miami-Dade County. IC Change is an AI-enabled data and community engagement platform to help cities adapt to climate change by utilizing real-time resident-generated data in a hyper-level scale. ICS empowers counties, cities, utilities to maintain, manage, and safeguard infrastructure, enabling them to respond and prevent extreme climate change-induced damage. Julia is the CEO at IC Change. Under her leadership, cities have used IC Change to generate over $25 million in infrastructure investments in low-income communities. IC Change was founded after reporting natural disasters and climate change for 12 years across the globe and in her own backyard in the Gulf Coast. She's received national awards and recognitions from the White House Climate Data Initiative, NASA, MIT Solve, Echoing Green, Village Capital, GRIST, ACU, and many more. She also serves on the American Meteorological Society's Board of Environment and Health. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you. If I'd known you were going to read that all out, I wouldn't have included it. Okay. But I'm really grateful. I'm grateful to you, Christine, and to you, Carolina, for the invitation to present our work. It's very much synergistic to so many of the topics that we've been hearing about today, and I look forward to the conversation. So I'm just going to jump right in. Let's see, here we go. So again, what is IC Change? We're a data and engagement platform for local governments and water utilities, counties, specifically y'all who have overlapping jurisdictions. We know how challenging this is, to monitor, plan, and maintain climate-ready infrastructure. And that includes our community engagement apps, which you see on the left, as well as our Insights platform, which starting this year is using AI to help prioritize actions in real time for more efficient response. We track several kinds of climate impacts like pollution and heat, but of course we're focusing on flooding today. So IC Change does three things really well. First, we're providing hyper-local engagement and resident recruitment. Again, you're getting half the picture if you're not talking to those who are most vulnerable in your community. Second, we are creating high-leverage, real-time, AI-driven data. And then finally, that application of that data is with regards to incident management, those baseline data collections that we talked about, but also, beyond model validation, also planning, design, build, monitoring, and evaluation. So I'm going to go a little bit into detail on those three buckets. So first, let's talk engagement and recruitment. We have a veteran team that can work with county and municipal communications staff, local nonprofits, CBO and university partners, and residents directly themselves to monitor flooding over time, not just during big events, but during the minor events that help us zero in on problem spots. We even train people to tell us when it is not flooding. We train people to tell us when the infrastructure is working. That is critical pieces of information. We can integrate to your websites. On the right, you can see how we integrate with the City of Miami's webpage. And we can staff your local events. We can design and amplify your social media content. And then we can take it to the street. If there are data gaps that you need, we can hyper-focus on those areas and generate data and engagement. During flood events and storm events, we send to your community real-time push notifications and emails that are tailoring messages, alerts, and prompts to posts. That includes amplifying your information direct to residents, keeping them informed. We're amplifying whatever the City of Miami or Miami-Dade County is putting out there, our other customers in other parts of the country. But those are also opportunities to educate your community, educate your residents, turn them into amplifiers of critical information as it relates to water height, flood duration, pollution mitigation, projects that are coming to their area. And most importantly, of course, how to stay safe. So let's take a second. Going back to education. So beyond just the data, right? Beyond just the one-way broadcasting, we actually have measured how residents are learning on our platform, from first post to last post. So IC Change, if you're familiar with us, it feels and looks like a social media product. And social scientists who've studied Facebook, who've studied Nextdoor, have looked at how residents have actually increased their climate risk education on our platform by virtue of their language use, the length of the post, the kinds of topics they talk about. You can see that they're grateful when they are heard. We do work with communication staff to respond to posts directly. We also have staff responding to posts directly. And that can help you with your CRS program when it comes to risk education. That can help you with consent decree reporting when it comes to how are you educating your people about their risk. And it also creates residents who are there to help you when you really need it. So again, going into that second bucket about high leverage real-time flooding data. The user experience is designed to be as easy and efficient as possible. We don't want you staying on our platform all day. We want you to come in and tell us your story, which is really critical. So people are actually sharing stories about flood impacts that they're seeing, in addition, of course, to the hyperlocal date, time, location, water height. We actually make that really easy for residents to track. And then we ask them even for additional details if we need it. But on the back end of IC Change, for every post on the platform, there are at least minimum 50 data points associated with any one post. That's in addition to the data that the residents themselves are providing. Hyperlocal details, again, about flood height, flood duration, even rain volumes. We train residents to do that. And we've had radar corrected to match resident reports in the past. We also, of course, have data API integrations. We sync to several weather data feeds and can make that custom for local sensor networks as well as data APIs that you all are working with. Of course, we're really excited to be here with the South Florida Water Management District in that regard. I'm going to go through a quick case study with the City of Miami. I'm going to call out Tim Kirby in the room right here. We have been the flood reporting tool for the City of Miami since 2020. And right away, when we started working with them, we started to centralize data across multiple departments. Multiple departments within the city are managing flood risk, whether it's the Department of Public Works, the Department of Emergency Management, capital improvements, resilience, and so on. And then we're giving that data to them in real time. And that is really important, of course, during a storm event. So we were the first to report that pumps were out during Tropical Storm Eta. In 2022, we triaged several flooding events. I'm sure you all remember that season. And we were able to receive the same number of posts as 911. If you are wanting to report flooding to the City of Miami, you can use IC Change. If you need rescue, call 911. And keeping those lines free for real emergency rescues and needs. After that data is collected, then of course it can be reused for model validation, for planning. So right away, we were able to demonstrate that inland neighborhoods that were of high interest to the City of Miami, where there wasn't very much data, were flooding at a much higher rate than their stormwater modeling suggested. And as a result, and those were in predominantly non-English speaking neighborhoods. So IC Change is available in Spanish and soon will be available in Haitian Creole. And with that data, they were able to apply for Resilience Florida grants. They generated $20 million. And we became their tool. So now we're piloting IC Change with Miami-Dade County this flood season. We're really excited to be rolling that out. And that brings us to overlapping jurisdictional flood reporting. We know that Miami-Dade County has 34 municipalities. City of Miami is one. You all are working with the South Florida Water Management District. We're all using different tools for different reasons, but very important ones. And we shouldn't be sending residents in loops trying to report, to multiple places for multiple reasons. So we are delivering data where it needs to go. If you need us to sync to or push data to 311, to an ESRI system, to your work order management system, to your staff in the field on their phones, via emails, via our custom viewer, we can do that. We have multiple ways we do that. Of course, we have the IC Change customer view, which I'll show you in a second. We can send direct emails for people for situational awareness and immediate response. We have APIs that we can use to sync to your systems. And of course, we can host data in ArcGIS as you are needing it. Can go on forever on this, but multiple ways to skin the cat, so to speak. This is the IC Change Insights platform, and we have just relaunched it. It is filtering by geography. It's designed for easy and quick response. You can sort by topic or incident, specific words. Every word on the IC Change database is coded. We know that flooding is co-occurring with trees that are down. That's why it's in the database and being shown here. Pollution events, and so on. It allows you to see hotspots quickly, assess community context, and it is, of course, real time. And starting this flood season, it will be AI enabled. So we'll be scanning the photos and the language using our modeling to help you prioritize response, especially during major events. Being able to distinguish what is a high priority versus a low priority is pretty critical. So in terms of use cases, more than one. And certainly we've talked about this all day, from the Army Corps of Engineers projects, from the design build projects that are being funded by the Resilient Florida program, when it comes to incident management response, maintaining canals. I'm not even reading these, I'm just spitballing them. But again, we can triage the systems that you're currently using, whether it's a 311 or a 911 system. And of course, being used in those federal and state grant applications. One other use case that is really important, I think, actually, is the engagement and data collection that happens as part of the design build process. We're kind of locked into this 0, 30, 60, 90% design, hold a meeting and call it engagement mode. And that's actually boxing a lot of people out of these processes, and they're not able to provide critical engagement and context about their lived experience. So we can provide that iterative tool in the beginning, middle, and end of a major project, and then do that monitoring and evaluation at the end. That's really critical, because we're all trying to figure out how to solve these problems. We're throwing a lot of spaghetti on the wall. We don't know what's going to stick and what's actually working and what needs to be improved. I guess I'm leaving the most important one to last, which is community stewardship and trust building. We can't do this alone. We need residents as partners as much as we need federal, state, and county and municipal agencies to be working together. So happy to take your questions and look forward to the conversation. Please reach out to me. I'm Julia at icchange.com, or scan that QR code.
Thank you very much, Julia, for your presentation. It has been, I'm happy to be here today because we really have been doing research on a lot of those things that we finally put together, and I'm seeing all the pieces kind of fitting together well, and it's exciting. It took us a few years to be where we are, and it's so nice that we are kind of seeing those things coming up to real life here. I think what Julia just presented fits an incredible need that we have as we advance those studies in Florida. Stakeholder engagement has been a big challenge, a significant challenge. I know the Corps invests a lot on those efforts, and we have several public workshops being planned as part of those flood vulnerability assessments. But really bringing the people that understands, that fully can read the problem and can contribute it in a meaningful way to the discussion, and to not only to the discussions, but to the solutions, has been a big challenge that we have. And I think tools like that they look like simple, but they can help in this process of educating, engaging, and really bringing the community to here. We have limitations on that a lot as an agency, and I need to say that here, South Florida Water Management District, on this aspect, don't want to confuse people. We don't want to get out and say, please tell me what's happening with your flood, where is flooding, because we don't respond to all of those flooding. Actually, we don't respond to most of those flooding cases. And so we are really here today to really collaborate as a team. We depend on really the local governments getting us and serving as the bridge. We are happy to host a database, to host information, to share all of that with local governments. We just need help on doing this outreach process, making sure that we can reach to the communities there and we get meaningful input data. We are framing our tool, our database, the repository data, in a way that we can easily bring data that are being collected by different tools. There are many different tools out there. I know Chris is going to be mad at me if I say we will collect all of them. No, we are building a way that we can have a data structure that is flexible enough to accommodate some of those things that are coming. And we had discussions, for instance, with Julia and her team, IC Change, because they already have they have Miami-Dade County. I mean, I have been listening from them, I think it's 2 years ago when I first heard about them. They have City of Miami, Miami-Dade County. And I mean, if they're collecting flood data there, we really don't want to recollect or we do any effort. We want to take advantage and leverage information that is getting out there. So I think we have, we have significant collaborations here, but the main message that we want to say is also this: we depend on working together where we are here to be able to be successful and get information at real time when we need and really be, and I mean, training throughout this wet season to show the value of everything that we are doing here. This is our challenge that we have, and we are committed to go to this wet season with a good way of sharing, collecting, sharing, and learning the whole data on flood. So key messages here. We do have a flyer that we put together. If you didn't get in the entrance, please make sure you got. It's a newer version. We distributed that in the last meeting, but we have a newer version here that explains a little bit the things that we have. So we will be promoting this flood observation survey this year. We're opening up to the public. But again, we are not going to be the main engagement agency. We're going to send information to all of you, and we count with your engagement process to get the word out, collect information, and share any data that you have been receiving through those flood events with us so we can put in our database repository. And again, it's open to all of you. So in the way that you can access this data is acquiring this flood information resource account. It's a signing process, very easy, but we need, of course, to make sure that we have the right users with the right profile so we can share the right information. Some information is proprietary, and we want to make sure that we are sharing what can be shared with all of you. In general, local governments will have access to anything that we have in our database. The public in general will have some limited access. So that's why we are managing that through those accounts. So, of course, during the event, if you want to log in and see what it's being collected there, it's going to be up there. Hopefully, we'll be successful in getting meaningful information there. So log in throughout the event. We are offering trainings. We have also dates and a QR code for you to sign up. This training is going to go through those tools, the flood observation survey, quickly, how people submit this data. It should be very intuitive, but it's always good to go through a quick training. And also, moving to beyond just the immediate, like real-time information that we want to get during the event, also making sure that we can enhance our high water mark database. This is something that we are asking you as available. Of course, we understand limitations in general, but if your county has interest and availability to help going one step further and also collecting high water marks, after the event, like as we notice the event, this is something that we are also going to be doing training and partnering with you. So please, just attend those events. For the high water marks, there is an app. For the flood survey, is not. But anyway, just download the app as needed and really deploy staff if they are available to help us document high water marks. So these are the dates. This is the QR code. I hope you all got a copy there too. We have several locations. They have capacity limitations, not as small, but I mean, we have some capacity limitations in those sites. So if you can pick two, perhaps two locations or 2 dates, just in case we run into a capacity limitation. Anything that I forgot? You can talk. Just go ahead.
It's only going to let you choose one. So if we have overflow, some of our facilities are really big. I don't think our staff are comfortable training 50 people at one time. So that's what, when they said capacity at Miami was that large, I said, do you really want to train that many people? So we're figuring out what the capacity is going to be based on the size of the room. And if, when you submit the survey, you're providing your email information. If we get to capacity, we'll email and give additional choices of facilities that have capacity. And since this is the first time doing it, we're just going to see how much response we get. And we'll gauge whether we need additional training or how we would revamp training next year. We do intend to do this in the April timeframe on an annual basis.
Great. So yeah, we welcome you to join on the trainings. Please sign up. And it's going to occur concurrently with our own staff. So our staff will also be trained as we train the cities and local governments. Okay, questions? Let's go around the table. Any questions to any of the presenters?
Yeah, the question on the radar, what's the vertical accuracy?
So there's different vertical accuracy on the actual satellite imagery, but I assume you mean on the flood depth. So we've done some validation studies on different events. Typically, the high water marks we've used for validation have been USGS, so that's what we can get our hands on. Although I'm curious to use the South Florida Water Management District high water marks. The most recent study that we did with Hurricane Ian data, we found most of the coastal areas mean absolute error between 18 and 35 centimeters. That was with the storm surge that was 10 to 15 feet in spots, so you'd expect a little higher. Inland, we had slightly higher mean absolute errors in and around the Orlando area, where we had some small lakes that overflowed. Most of those mean absolute error values were still under about 50 to 60 centimeters.
It's vertical or?
Yeah.
In South Florida, most are, we're fairly flat. And so often the relief across the development is less than 2 feet. House pads are often 2 to 4 feet above the control level. So and it just takes an inch above the finished floor to and put $1,000 damage, and then you get that curve where damages don't go up for a couple more inches, but then when you get it really high, you got electrical and other stuff that crank up as additional impacts. So just trying to get a feel for that.
Yeah, just on that note, oftentimes we found with the USGS high water marks that a lot of them were based in and around channels, where you had a lot of that difference was caused by the gradient around the channel, not necessarily outside the channel itself.
Paul, you bring up a point about why high water marks and marking and measuring is important. And the marking, we can always send a surveyor out there if it's an important area to get it more precise. And the more high water marks we have to validate ISI as well as other modeling products, the better off we're going to be in really trying to estimate the areas that are flooding to the extent that they're flooding and to the depth that they're flooding.
Also, just don't overlook these smaller events that do cause this kind of damage, particularly the 2 to 5, 10-year occurrence intervals, which most of our stormwater infrastructure projects, with the exception of the larger Army Corps projects, really are targeting. And so that's really critical data to be tracking, and it, particularly with regards to flood heights. Yeah.
Yes, team.
I also have another question for ISI. I know that there's limitations, speaking to Julie's point, but like the 5, 10-year storms that, may be coming through. But I just wanted to ask, what about the ability for eyesight to do those, or to be able to map those rain bomb events like the one that happened last year in Fort Lauderdale. And the ability, because I know that you said they're not passive, satellites, you have the ability to, let's say that you have an event like that that may be coming, and to be able to like shift, or be able to shift satellites to potentially be able to capture information like that.
Yeah, so it's all about timing, right? So obviously longer duration events, we have a much better chance of getting multiple images at. With the rain bomb events, or short burst events, it becomes a little bit more difficult to capture. To give you an example, Fort Lauderdale's been hit with a couple over the last 2 years. We were able to capture the first one that had a lot of flooding over the airport, because we had a couple of image acquisitions over that one, and caused some pretty extensive flooding in that area. With the second one, I think the end of last year, that was a more difficult one for us to capture temporally and spatially. So we did not successfully capture much in the way with imagery on that one.
Yes. Can you repeat the question for the online people?
Yeah, his question was around whether or not rainfall can potentially impact the reflectivity returns from the synthetic aperture radar. The answer in 99.99% of the cases is no. You do have the very extreme, so I think it's top 0.01% of rainfall returns that could impact it. The amount of events that have occurred over the last couple of years that I've seen that on thousands of images has been, I could count on one hand.
Great. Any more questions? Yes, Nancy.
Nancy Gassman, City of Fort Lauderdale. So if you capture data related to an event and you don't have a client, what do you do with the data?
We always have a client. No. We also operate, so we sit on the government side. And obviously, on the government side, we work in the federal space and state and local. But there is a commercial side, too, that works in insurance. And we have insurance clients that have basically insured assets everywhere around the world. Reinsurers that have been reinsured assets that most people don't even realize are reinsured under them. So there's always someone that's interested in the data.
More questions?
Carolina, can I add something?
Yeah.
I'll do something short. One of the things that we are working with ISI in our collaboration and through our subscription is their focus has really been on the urban built environment, and in our the context of how flooding can occur in some parts of the South Florida system. It can start in an upstream natural system and then impact the built environment. So we're working with them to try to provide insights on how to best serve us in terms of collecting this information and allowing us to better understand how an event plays out.
Okay.
Carolina.
Oh, yes, one more question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Meenakshi Chabba from the Everglades Foundation. Julia, I've been aware of your work for a long time, and I'm so happy to see you here. And thanks to Carolina for getting all these assets we have in our region under one space. So my question here is, and I'm actually wondering whether the data you collect for people who participate in your app and collect the rainwater data, is there any thought being given to use that, who contributes to the flood data and where they're located, to studies like the 216 study or the Back Bay studies, so that we can enrich not only our scoping of those studies, but also what are the different flood drivers that our people are facing and how we can address that. And you could really push for that, for those studies to address these problems. Thank you.
We would welcome that. We would welcome the opportunity to work with you specifically, and I've been wanting to connect to your foundation for a while as well. We would welcome working with the Army Corps on those studies because they're so critical to our future, the future of South Florida, and specific community members. And it's really such critical insights that are gathered every day by people in their daily lives that are missed in these large planning processes. We make it easy and efficient to sort the data. And actually, we are hopefully, knock on wood, funded by the National Science Foundation for the next generation of our AI, which will get to root cause analysis. So really looking at, is this an undersized pipe? Is it trash in the drain? Is this a hot spot? Is this tidal, pluvial, and so on? So it is really an exciting time, and we look forward and welcome partnership.
Okay. I don't see, oh, yes, Nancy.
Sorry, just a quick response to that. I can't tell you the number of times people call in and they say, my drain needs to be cleaned because my road's flooding, and they are completely and totally incorrect about the cause of what's resulting in the flooding.
Education part is so critical. It's, you know, and it's collaborative knowledge creation that really allows you to get to where you need to be with that.
And that can lead to poor planning, not really fully understanding what are the responses. Okay, so I think we're going to go and start our last session of the day. It's really around the table updates from local and state agencies here. I'm going to start with my right, with Charlotte County. So quickly going around, getting the greatest and latest that you have to share among us.
Hi, sorry, this is Claire Jubb. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for Charlotte County. Just first of all, Carolina, thank you so much. Great program. I always love being able to come over here and listen to all the exciting stuff you're doing. So fantastic job. From Charlotte County's perspective, we are in the final stages of letting our contract for our vulnerability assessment. So hopefully that should be underway very soon. We're also doing a lot of work around water quality. We recently held a water quality town hall with our residents to give them some information on just the things that the county is doing in terms of water quality from a holistic perspective, looking at both flooding, drinking water, septic to sewer, everything like that we do around water. Our septic to sewer program, as always, is a very big priority for us and something that we are actively pursuing from a water quality perspective. We also have an appropriations request in for this year around flooding and flood monitoring, which was a direct result of lessons learned from Hurricane Ian, where we didn't really have a good handle on our potential for flooding in the area of the Peace River and Charlotte Harbor. So a few good things really happening in Charlotte County, and it's exciting to hear what everybody else is doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Okay, next one, do we have improvement district? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Aiden Cronin. I'm one of the Resilient Florida field agents. I'm in charge of the projects down here in the Southeast Florida. And this is my first time to one of these forums, so I didn't bring any updates. But I have projects with almost all of the municipalities here. So I look forward to working with all of you.
Great, thanks, welcome, and feel free to come and join us. I think if you want to use this forum to get any help on your mission there, we will be more than happy to provide support.
Can you hear me okay? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacey Caceres. I am the new Resilience and Sustainability Analyst for the Palm Beach County Office of Resilience. I think usually we have Megan or Natalie that attend, so they sent me here today. I am fresh to the Office of Resilience. This is my third week, but I do actually come with some updates on behalf of my office. So we did want to share that we are continuing to work on our vulnerability assessment for the unincorporated Palm Beach County and the Glades municipalities. There is currently a draft vulnerability assessment that the project team is presenting to the steering committee and at community workshops for feedback. We have a community workshop that is scheduled tonight for unincorporated Palm Beach County at the Westgate Community Center, and that will be held from 6 to 7:30. I do have some flyers for that if anyone is interested in sharing the information or if you'd like to attend. There's also a virtual option. The vulnerability assessment will incorporate feedback, and it's going to be finalized in April of this year. We also received Resilient Florida funding to assist 6 Palm Beach County municipalities with their vulnerability assessments. And the 6 municipalities are Cloud Lake, Glen Ridge, Gulf, Haverhill, Hypoluxo, and Palm Springs. We are still finalizing the scope of work for that, and then we'll execute the grant agreement. And that's it.
And I got your last name because there was, but not the first, sorry.
Stessi.
Stessi, nice meeting you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Sandy?
Sandra Bogan. I'm the Resilience Navigator with St. Lucie County. We are in the final stages of going under contract to implement our vulnerability assessment. It's a community-wide. We only have 3 cities, so it's a little easier than Palm Beach County. We're also working on partnerships, Water Management District, Army Corps of Engineers. We have a CAP program. We just signed the feasibility study cost share agreement, and it's regarding the North Fork St. Lucie River. So if there's any collaborative opportunities there. We have several studies going. Water Management District's doing one, Corps is doing one, we're doing one, so it'd be kind of fun to bring it all together. And I think that's about it for now, but thank you. Great meeting.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you very much. Okay, Nancy?
Hi, yep, I'm Nancy Jackson. I'm the Biscayne Bay Program Manager in the Office of Resilience. I'm here representing our office, and thanks to Tim and to Carolina, you guys provided great updates on a lot of the work we're doing with y'all. It was great, especially to get the recap on the Army Corps projects. That way I don't have to do it. It's much more information from Tim. But yeah, just like the other counties, we're currently working also on our vulnerability assessment. We're trying to do our county asset sea level rise and flooding vulnerability assessment, also with DEP funding. And we're also doing a progress report for our sea level rise strategy, which we hope to be released in May. And we are honestly also trying to use that as a chance to put into broader context the Back Bay and the 216 study, for example. So also trying to do our own integration in the Office of Resilience. We had a great tabletop exercise with FEMA and a lot of the partners here as well, municipalities, the district, our colleagues in our Division of Environmental Resource Management, OOR. Really, we had about 150 participants in the tabletop exercise related to flooding and emergency management. Our mayor is very keen on having our flood plan updated and released later this year. So this is great information for all of us. And then on the water quality side, we're getting ready to relaunch our reasonable assurance plan together with our partners at DEP. We were able to regroup and get through the procurement process to bring in our consultants to get that going. That will be shepherded through our Biscayne Bay Watershed Management Advisory Board. So stay tuned for updates on that. We're really excited. We had about a year hiatus as we had to regroup to do an entire watershed reasonable assurance plan. So it's a huge undertaking for us, and we're really excited. And I would love to get in touch with Charlotte County about their town hall on water quality, because those are the kinds of things we're going to be doing as part of the reasonable assurance plan, bringing our citizens and our residents along to keep them informed and provide input into that process. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Nancy. Nancy, Fort Lauderdale.
Well, first off, I'd like to say I'm extremely grateful it's the dry season. We are approaching our 1-year anniversary for the 26-inch rain bomb that occurred on April 12th of 2023. And this week, we are just getting staff back into rented office space with the drowning of City Hall. So recovery from these events takes a very long time, and it's very important to understand when it's going to happen and how to respond to it. The city is also pursuing its Florida statute-related vulnerability assessment. In 2023, there were 180 high tides that created nuisance flooding or worse within the city. We're seeing that these events are happening more and more often, and that even though NOAA provides a predicted elevation, we are seeing last year that the average elevation was 6 inches above the predicted elevation in the tide tables. And that 6 inches has a huge effect in areas with very little topography. The city is also pursuing accelerating our current $200 million investment in stormwater infrastructure. We've accelerated the timelines of our existing design projects, and we are moving forward with the design and modeling of 17 additional neighborhoods with the expectation that we will be spending an additional $500 million on stormwater improvements over the next 10 years. And finally, in March 11th through March 14th, we will be working with the Urban Land Institute in a public engagement activity to do a technical advisory panel exploring criteria for road elevation for the city of Fort Lauderdale. There is a listening event on the evening of March 11th, and the panel will be doing a report out on the morning of Thursday, March 14th. Both of those events will be broadcast on the city's YouTube channel.
Very interesting. I'm interested on this road elevation discussions. I'll follow up next. Thank you, Nancy, very much. Okay, we have DEM, Daniel.
Hi, can everybody hear me? All right, good. I want to start off by simply thanking Christine. I really wanted to come down here. I've worked with Christine, and I'm engaged in quarterly meetings with Christine. And I'm always just so impressed with what she brings to the table. And I really wanted to, the last time we were together, I really wanted to impress upon her that I really need to come down to the district and see your shop and see where all this great work comes from. And this campus is amazing, too. I can't believe it's so expansive. So I have a few updates that I can provide that I think are relevant for the group here. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do at FDEM GIS that doesn't necessarily fall. We wear lots of different hats, right? A little bit about us. We're a 3-person team, so there's myself, and we have 2 analysts that work with us, and we're responsible for lots of things. So you know, we're spread out, but that's what's great about working for the division is we get to you know, work on projects and things from all these different areas, and I think it really rounds us out. Now, specifically about some updates, I mean, I think this time of the season, it's never off-season in emergency management, but sometimes it feels like that, the way it goes in the summer. So we do a lot of housekeeping, a lot of app modernization. Our applications that we build GIS-wise are both, you know, for internal purposes, and they're for the public, for public safety. They're to communicate with the public. So we are constantly updating these applications to make sure that they are performing to the best that they possibly can, that they're the most informative without being top-heavy. And so we're constantly updating these applications, such as Know Your Zone. Everybody probably knows Know Your Zone. It's where you can go on the FDEM website and find where your evacuation zone is. You can put your address in. We just did a big overhaul on that, and we're really happy with that. We enriched it with some new information where you can find information from your local emergency management office, along with just understanding what zone designation you're in. So you can find that through our geo portal and through our state website. I think another thing that's important, that's kind of flying under the radar, is, you know, FDEM is responsible for collecting all the new built elevation certificates across the state by state statute. So we have, and we were doing this ourselves. We were actually getting PDF documents in the mail. you know, and we were actually scanning them in to make them digital to go into our GIS, and it was quite the process. And we've partnered with a group called Forerunner, and they have just been absolutely amazing. They've done basically two pieces. They've opened a portal that's available through our website where the surveyor who collected the certificate can upload that certificate and relevant information from that survey. But they've also, and from the GIS side, this is why it's exciting, is that we now have a map service that is a live reflection of all the data that's coming in with elevation certificates. So if you're not familiar with that, you can access the FDEM Forerunner application, which has a Forerunner has actually their own map box sort of GUI that's available, where you can explore elevation certificates, but you can also go through our website and you can view dashboards about the the locations and the counselor certificates and such. And the service allows us to map it and analyze it, and I think that's really exciting. Geospatial coordination calls is another big piece for us. It's not necessarily related just to floodplain. However, in conjunction with our state GIO, FDEM, ESRI, and some other stakeholders get together during times of emergency, and we conduct calls that bring stakeholders together from all over the state and really the country that have a common interest in navigating a disaster, a major disaster. We've had a lot of traction with these calls, and one of the big successes I think that we've had recently is that we've used the state GIO website, and we're anchoring our calls there, so anybody that has interest in wanting to participate in these calls, because everybody's invited, you can get the credentials to actually access the calls, and we also curate the information that goes on with those calls, and you can pull that data down from the state GIO website. And let's see, and I think that's pretty much it. I've taken up a good amount of time, so I just want to thank everybody for providing a seat for FDEM for this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. All super relevant updates. Thank you for sharing all of that. Okay, team, City of Miami.
Hi, Tim Kirby, Resilience Programs Manager with the Office of Resilience Sustainability for the City of Miami. My main update is just like most people here, just continuing with our vulnerability assessment. We just wrapped up our community engagement portion of the vulnerability assessment, which included district-level in-person community engagement meetings, but also an online mapping tool as well as surveying tool where we had members from the community map assets, according to FDEP's, or excuse me, the Resilient Florida critical asset definition, to be able to figure out, assets that the communities prioritize. And then the surveying is, of course, how do they deal with flooding. The second portion of that is in terms of our asset mapping with the exposure analysis component of it. We are basically not only doing the required sea level rise, curve events, but we're also doing compound flooding. We were originally doing, only the 10-year compound flood event, but, as the city of Fort Lauderdale has mentioned in terms of, these very intense rain bomb events, we've started to include the 100-year compound flood event, and that's high tide as well as rainfall, just to, particularly account and to try to map what particular critical assets that may be vulnerable under scenarios that may qualify, for those rain bomb events. But just, one of the last pieces that, for the community engagement portion is the information that we provide, that we've gathered from our community members also helps us in terms of the second portion of the vulnerability assessment of prioritizing assets. And based on the community feedback, we're able to understand the consequence that these critical assets have to the community. And so that's how we're, in gathering that feedback, we're able to prioritize what assets, we should go after funding for to protect against storm or rainfall events.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim. Yes, Boynton Beach, we have.
Hi. Hi, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Good afternoon. So my name is Alana Irwin. I'm the Sustainability and Resiliency Administrator for the City of Boynton Beach. I've been to a few of these forums, but this is the first time I've actually been able to stay the whole time. I've been with the city for about 9 months now. I just wanted to highlight some of the projects that we're working on in the City of Boynton Beach that would be relevant to what we're discussing here today with flooding. So we're currently working on some drainage improvement projects in 2 of our intracoastal communities. We were awarded 2 Resilient Florida Program grants for implementing these projects. One of them is our Lakeside Gardens, and the other one is Coquina Cove. Both of those areas have severe flooding from sunny day flooding or king tide. So we're working to try to improve the stormwater drainage there to ensure that residents are actually able to leave their community during these events. We're also working on some master planning, particularly stormwater master planning and watershed master planning, to just make sure that we're analyzing all of our assets that we have existing and trying to plan for the future, the next 10 years of critical flooding that we're experiencing from rainfall-induced and non-rainfall incidents. We were also recently awarded a Resilient Florida Program planning grant for our climate adaptation planning. We've had a statutorily compliant vulnerability assessment since 2021, but we haven't taken it to the next level yet to actually do an adaptation plan. So we're going to take all of our existing vulnerability assessment analysis and come up with somewhat of a climate strategic master plan to make sure that we're prepared for future sea level rise and other threats that we've identified as part of this. And then the last thing is we were also what I'm calling conditionally funded Resilient Florida Program implementation grant for a living shoreline project. We were ranked 17, so we were deferred to year 2 right now, hoping that there's enough funding available for us to implement this living shoreline. It's currently going to be at 3 of our coastal parks that do experience significant flooding as well. So we're looking to incorporate a green-gray hybrid infrastructure that would ultimately allow us to extend the shoreline by installing more mangroves and hopefully allow us to reduce the risk of flooding there. So those are some of the key projects that we're working on here, and this was great today. I loved hearing all the presentations, and I look forward to the next forum.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Thank you very much, Amar. Okay, FDOT.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Vader. I work with drainage in District 4 FDOT. This was my first opportunity to come to this event. I'm new to Florida as of a year ago. So I've slowly been working my way into the resiliency planning, and I enjoyed coming today and hearing all the presentations. And I'm going to hand it off to my colleague here who is going to update on what's going on with the Department of Transportation.
Well, in the interest of time, I think I'll pass to Greg and then we'll come back next time, if that's okay.
Thanks, Louis.
Well, I'm going to speak about FDOT a little bit, so I'll get you an updated info anyway. Greg Mountain, Assistant Chief Resilience Officer for Broward County, here on behalf of Dr. Jurado, who regrets not being able to be here today, but shares her thank you for putting together such a great forum and bringing everybody together to talk about these things quarterly. From Broward County, I'd like to share I have a couple of projects going on with people in the room, so perhaps an update for them as well. We have a few FDEP Resilience Florida grants going on now. We're at 100% design and waiting on permits for our State Road A1A project. So hopefully you'll come down. I know you emailed me about coming down and doing a site visit, and hopefully we have some groundbreaking to share with you in the next few months, which is quite exciting. We also have an FDEM Watershed Master Plan Initiative grant that hopefully I'll be getting the deliverables for this week, and hopefully in the next week or two can connect back with you guys to make things work. and get that moved forward. Also, with the State Road A1A, with FDOT as a partner and the City of Hollywood, can't leave them out. That's a large-scale project that's been years in the making with a lot of coordination, so I apologize for leaving that mission out. But I told you I'd get you in. And last and certainly not least, Broward County has kicked off Underwater Broward with Xavier Cortada, the eco-artist from Miami. As you know, a lot of his work is socially engaged outreach and making the communities aware of the problems that we all face. So as part of that, he's going with his team to 10 schools to do engagement activities with at least 1,000 students. He'll be painting 10 murals inside those schools and be holding additional outreach activities in the community so we can have a community climate conversation in some of our more low-lying areas to get that information out. So hopefully you've seen it on our social media, but I saw my first sign in the wild this weekend and was able to interact with the parents and the student and had the actual sign in their yard, and it was just an amazing connection that they could, oh, let me tell you about sea level rise. I'm like, sure, I'm all ears, let's talk about it. So that was great to share. So hopefully you can go check out our social media and see those events as they come up. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. And Paul?
Paul Litton, Palm Beach County's Water Resource Manager. No additional comments.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so I really appreciate everybody joining us today. It was an incredible morning, a lot of really relevant discussions here, presentations. Thanks for the presenters that also flew out here today. I really appreciate the discussion. I'm sure we're going to continue engaging in all of those actions, big follow-ups, critical elevations information, and sign up for the training. We are also giving away calendars. Nicole, can you get them and get to the people in the hands before they leave? So these are calendars that we distributed in the last Water and Climate Conference. There is a lot of interesting information for everybody that is a water geek. Is going to be very interesting. You're going to love going through this calendar. Okay? Thank you. Have a wonderful day. We will see each other again on May 29th. Thank you.